Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at Silicon Dragon, Silicon Global Online at our CES show. It's our 4th annual CES show, and some of our panelists are going to be joining us from CES, so I'm excited about that. And I think you will be too. The program is great, and it's a long program, but it has lots of really interesting elements, including VC, VR, NFTs, crypto, the Metaverse, and many companies from Asia as well, the hottest markets in Asia. So we really have a great program lined up for you this evening. Many of you have joined us before and you know the drill, but for those who are newcomers, it's a little bit about us at Silicon Dragon Ventures. We have our newsletter and our Circle membership, our mobile app, and our Ask a VC series, along with our videos. So today's program will be videoed, but today is the only day that you can ask a question. So it's really worthwhile to join the program and be live. I'd like to thank our sponsors who helped to make this program possible. And they include Nixon Peabody. You can see David Kaufman right there in the middle. KPMG, Darren Young, they're on my left-hand side, KPMG. Invest Hong Kong, Jacko Sang. She's been with us for many times, and we're happy to have Invest Hong Kong with us again, along with Cyberport. Now, I've mentioned that we do have a great program lined up of all of these elements, many moving parts, and we wanted to start with our Ask a VC session. You know that some of you have participated in our Ask a VC session in the past, and we've been doing, I think, maybe 40 shows now with leaders from all over the world. So tuning in next is going to be Nan Zhao. She is actually at CES right now. Hi, Nan, how are you?
Very good, very good. How are you, Rebecca?
I'm okay, okay. So Nan is an investor at Qualcomm Ventures, a strategic investor. She was previously U.S. Investment Director of Baidu Capital. And before that, she was an Assistant VP of Investment Banking at Barclays and Jefferies in Hong Kong and New York City. So she's been in all these hotspots, Hong Kong, New York City, and Silicon Valley. And now Vegas. So how are things in Vegas, Nan?
It's awesome here. Yeah, so we see a lot of interesting stuff here, including the Metaverse, auto technology, and a bunch of interesting startups here. So okay. I think this is worthwhile to come over to take a look.
Oh, okay. Is it better that it's less crowded than normal?
Oh, it's less crowded, and I think it's better because you have you can get more attention from interesting startups.
Oh, okay. Well, I imagine that everybody wants to get your attention as an investor.
Well, you know, previously some of the really cool stuff will have so many people there, but this time it's way much better. So you'll have you can spend more time with companies or the startups you want to talk to them, and have really good, you know, the on-site experience with some of the really cool products.
All right. So what kind of startups are you interested in?
Also, you know, because I think this year Metaverse has been the hot topic, right? And also Qualcomm is a really important element for the Metaverse sector, being able to provide the computing power. So I do pay attention to some of the, you know, the Metaverse or VR product. But unfortunately this year, Microsoft and Google did not attend the CES. But I do notice that, you know, like Sony, even TCL, and also some other, I think there is another big company also they launched some product concept of Samsung about Metaverse, and they kind of converted with smart home experience, gaming experience, and also notice some of the sport tech also have the Metaverse concept to make the VR experience part of to make the sports part of the VR experience.
Okay, well, good. So we have HTC on our program next, and Alvin Wang from China is going to be speaking about HTC Vive and all of their VR stuff that they have going on. So yeah, that's coming up next. But I think he's tuning in from Beijing. He's not in Vegas like you are. Okay, so Nan, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you become a VC, and what do you like about it, and what's it like being a female VC in an all-male, almost all-male dominated VC world?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's an interesting topic. So it's been a long journey for me to become a VC, and then I never think about it become a VC when I started my career as an investment banker. So after I graduated from Wharton full-time MBA program, I joined the Barclays as an investment banker. I actually made the transition from New York to Hong Kong because I never worked in China after coming to the US for undergrad. So I think I was very lucky when I was investment banker in Hong Kong that I was able to catch the very, the taking off of the mobile internet trend in China. So I was being part of the JD.com IPO, Alibaba IPO, and also being participating in some of the mobile internet companies such as a mobile search engine, and also some of the AI computing chips at that time, very early stage, the potential IPO. So having this early tech trend really paved the way for me to become a VC. In 2016, when Baidu was looking for an AI investor in Silicon Valley, I was very lucky to be selected with all the experience, tech experience in Hong Kong, I mean, in the understanding with the mobile internet in China and Asia. And also I spent a lot of time self-study on AI because actually in 2015, I noticed that would be the trend, and also IoT will be the trend in about 5 to 10 years. So looking back, you can see that all of these predictions come true, right? And then that's when I joined Baidu in 2016. AI, it became a really hot topic, and I worked with Andrew Ng's team a lot, and we not just learning a lot of stuff on AI, but also look at over hundreds and 200 startups in Silicon Valley. That's how I built up my career expertise in AI, and also investing a lot of interesting startups for Baidu during 2016 to 2019. And then in 2020, I was very lucky to be recruited by Qualcomm Ventures to become their first female VC in North America. And as you know, that Qualcomm is the leading chip company for the mobile chip, and also nowadays Qualcomm chips is everywhere, AI, 5G, IoT. So the Qualcomm Ventures investment focus has been in both, not just financial, but also strategic, to invest in the startups that can build up, also benefit from the Qualcomm's ecosystem.
Well, good. Yeah.
In terms of the feeling about being a female VC, I think it's an interesting topic because I do notice that in the deep tech investment sector, you don't see a lot of female VC. I guess it's because most of the deep tech sectors are mostly male dominated, not because they want to dominate, because I think most of the males are being majored in computer science, in the STEM sector. That made them become a natural selection of being a VC. But for female VC, I think we have some difference, differentiation, the niche of being a female. I think for myself, number one is I think female has can bring the better trust, can build up the trust with the entrepreneurs naturally, because we do tend to be more have the empathy and can build up these connections immediately, right? And that's the first advantage of being a female VC. And the second is that I think in terms of the thinking system, being of a male, you tend to be a lot more logic. You're like a left brain oriented. But for the female VC, indeed you're more emotional, have this right brain oriented, but that also makes you being a divergent thinker. You can process things simultaneously, and you can be a hustler and networking much more efficiently. And after investment, for me, I sit on the board of a few startups, and I was able to always simultaneously help the entrepreneurs connect with the very important resources they need to help them achieve the sort of the BD or revenue growth goals for the startups they need. So I think in the female, you have this divergence, the empathy, and also being a hustler are all the advantages of being in this industry.
Yeah, and I think things are changing a little bit too. It's becoming a little bit more open and diversified. So I want to bring up a topic about Elizabeth Holmes and the whole, trial. And what do you think about that? Is that a strike against females in tech innovation or not? What do you think?
Okay, so I think yeah, so I do notice that he had the news about the Theranos, and I know that when she started, it's been like she was like a superstar, and she did believe that what she did will be the big innovations technology in the healthcare. But however, I think it's a fraud. I think maybe in the beginning of this startup, there is something fundamentally not right. And maybe she either intentionally or not intentionally want to make it happen, but at a certain point, it goes to the wrong way. So I think it's not about being a female or a male. I think it's being an entrepreneur. You have to stick into your originals of why you want to add value, why you want to build up this disruptive technology and disruptive product that can truly benefit the people or human beings. So yeah, I think for this particular example, that is regardless of being a female or male, it's about your the original purpose of being an entrepreneur.
Okay, good answer. Tell us about some of your investments. What kind of things do you have on the menu there?
Yeah. So well, since I joined Qualcomm Ventures in 2020, I continued my investment focus in applied AI, and my primary goal is to find the interesting, innovative AI startups that can benefit from Qualcomm solutions, especially the Edge AI computing. So there are several interesting startups. The first one is called iFi, which is a AI-enabled autonomous store startup, cashless checkout, which is very similar to Amazon Go. So when you enter into the iFi-enabled retail store, you can just grab and go, and the computer vision system will track what's your shopping cart, and then you just leave the store, and it will be automatically get paid via your payment.
Okay, well that sounds like a good one. Is that in the U.S.?
It's in the U.S. Yeah. So the company was doing very well. So they already had a robust customers like Rebeca, Choice, Carrefour, and also Aldi. So they're launching over 30 stores in the last quarter of 2021, and they will be launching over 200 stores in 2022. So very excited about this investment.
Okay, well that sounds like a really good one. So are they at CES as well?
Oh, they were originally planning to launch the store together with Verizon and I think also Microsoft at CES, but then it was being canceled, so that you cannot see that at CES. But there were a lot of YouTube videos there about iFi enabled stores, so that you can check on that. Yeah,
okay,
and also and also I want to mention about my second another investment called Invia Robotics, which is also an AI enabled autonomous warehouse automation solution to optimize the warehouse workflow, particularly for e-commerce customers. Because after pandemic, you probably noticed that over 30% of the consumption becoming online, right? So all these logistics in the warehouse are becoming a bottleneck. So the warehouse automation solution is really, in the never ever in this urgent point to become more automated and more efficient. So Invia Robotics is a software entry, but with the robotics solution to expedite logistics and workflow in the warehouse. So this is another interesting company.
So what about Qualcomm? Are they announcing anything at CES? Or tell us a little bit about what's happening at Qualcomm in tech.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yesterday, I think Qualcomm CEO Cristiano Alvin announced the Snapdragon chassis, which is a solution for ADAS for auto sector. So Qualcomm's Snapdragon chassis and so also the Snapdragon Ride will be able to enable a lot of will enable the autonomous driving solution. It's mostly ADAS solution, and also for level 2 or level 2.5, level 3 self-driving cars. So he announced the partnership with, I remember Honda, and also over 100 OEMs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds like big,
Very
sounds like
exciting.
big news.
It's a big news. Yeah.
Self-driving is really making a lot of progress, making a lot of strides.
Yeah, absolutely. You probably noticed that this year is shorting of the chip solution, especially for self-driving cars. So I think Qualcomm's really been a great solution in solving the problem of the chip shortage for the auto sector.
Okay. Well, good. So let's see if there are any questions out there. I'd love to see that some people coming on with some questions for Nan. So if you do have a question, you just type it into the Q&A. Matten, you want to type your question into the Q&A? So let's see. And then you have any idea how many people are at CES this year? That's a question somebody has here on the Zoom. Any idea how many people are there yet at CES?
Oh yeah, so I saw the news say that it's probably over 100K this year. Yeah, but it's still absolutely less than previous years.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. It seems to be like 1/3 of the 2020.
1/3. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I always love going, but I just decided that this time we would do a virtual program, and it allows us to have people from all over. We have for our upcoming program people from Indonesia, Hong Kong, Singapore, and you in Silicon Valley. So Matten is here, joined us, and he has a question about your AI self-study. Do you want to give him any tips about how you manage that, and what worked for you?
Oh yeah, so I spent a lot of time in 2015, 2016 when I didn't know a lot about AI. So later on, I realized that to study on AI, there were several, I think, perceptions that you need to break through. Number one is that you need to understand what's a basic core technology for AI, right? For example, computer vision, natural language understanding, speech recognition. So these are all the core basis for AI. So what I do is that I do a lot of research, like Wikipedia, read on the paper about how computer vision work, how does speech recognition work, what's the most frontier framework for AI. For AI, for example, nowadays the transformer BERT are the key framework for the natural language understanding, and also for computer vision, you have GAN, which is the most advanced algorithm framework. So you do spend time on this, and then with this core technology, you can understand, and then you look at okay, what kind of the vertical sectors can be disrupted by AI, right? Including autonomous, healthcare. Depends on your interest, right? If you're interested in specific sector, you can try to connect the dots of this core technology. How does that help with the with a specific aspect? And for example, from gathering the data, how the system or the solution gather the data, and how the algorithm work out, anything unique about this algorithm, if this startup, and also what kind of problem they're trying to solve. So I always have the purpose and the solution in your mind, and then you can find an answer.
Yeah, so it sounds like that's one of the reasons you got involved with this, is because it's a horizontal technology. It crosses over so many areas. So I'm just reading between the lines, and that's probably the reason you got interested in it. But yeah, I mean, you're really deep into it as well. So here's a question from Michael Dalleman. How close do you work with Qualcomm strategy and sourcing deals? I know you're doing strategic investing and financial investing, both for Qualcomm.
Yeah.
And so Michael has a question of whether you'd be interested in a customized chip for creating 3D digital images for technology that is complementary to the text in the metaverse, but can be used without glasses or goggles. Or goggles, I mean, not Google's goggles.
Well,
Okay,
so
there.
yeah, it sounds like this is a bespoke, customized chip solution, right? You're specifically seeking for.
Yeah, it could be, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, I think so what, because Qualcomm has so many customers, and for investment purpose, if we do, find an interesting startup that could be benefited from Qualcomm solution, and also the startup will be potentially solving a big problem. If we make the investment, of course, there, the solution will become Qualcomm's priority to help them to provide the specific solution. That's how Qualcomm add value to this ecosystem, to the startup, because they will really, really solve a great problem in the sector.
Okay.
So I think by natural, there will be, they will become, when they become a big company, a big unicorn, that's also Qualcomm helping add a lot of value for the customized chip solution for that specific one. If it's a metaverse, I hope so.
Okay, well, good. Oh, thank you for sharing so much, Nan. It was very interesting. We'll have to have you back on for our hour-long Ask a VC show. And so let's schedule that for sometime soon, because I can see that you have a lot of knowledge to offer all of us. So
thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you so much. And we're going to move on to our HTC, and Alvin Wang Graylin is going to be joining us next. So Alvin, why don't you join the stage? And Nan, thank you again.
My pleasure. I'll mute myself.
Okay.
Hi, Rebecca. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to join your event.
Yeah, no, I'm so happy you're here. And we have, I know you're going to be talking about the difference between the metaverse and the internet. And, I learned a lot just looking at your slide here. But anyhow, I've known Alvin for quite some time. I met him in China, I think in Shanghai. I don't know, maybe 8 years ago or more. So Alvin,
quite a bit more, probably about 12 or 13 years ago. So.
Okay, could be. Time flies. So he's China president of HTC, and also vice chairman of the Industry of VR Alliance and president of VR VC Alliance. So you're really in the hot spot of all of this metaverse stuff, and we'd love to hear you explain about how the metaverse is expanding but not replacing the internet. So do you want to share the slide?
Yeah, I'll do a slide share. Oh, it says you cannot share the screen while the participant is sharing. So I think you have to unshare so I can share.
I stopped sharing and you can share now.
All right, so yeah, I think as even the earlier speaker was saying, metaverse has been a very hot topic this last whole year, really, and it's really just heated up over the last 3 or 4 or 6 months. It's even though it's a fairly new buzzword, it's something that's been around for a very, very long time. Actually, it was first coined in 1992 in Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. And the concept is essentially, it's a very realistic world that you can go into where you can essentially live all the different aspects of your life without leaving the digital world, right? It sounds a little bit mysterious and a little bit too sci-fi, but if anybody's watched Ready Player One, it's kind of the whole Ready Player One theme, or kind of the Matrix concept, but it's something that isn't 50 years away or 100 years away. It's something that actually a lot of the pieces for it is already available today. But I think one thing that all of these novels or sci-fi movies have in common is that they all have a dystopian real world, so that they escape to this metaverse utopian world, sort of. Right. But I think what we really want to be looking at is actually creating the opposite, is that we want to have both a utopian physical world and a very good kind of virtual world to spend part of our time in. So I think one easy way to explain the metaverse, because pretty much right now, if you ask a lot of people, everybody gives you a very different answer. And I think the easiest way to understand it is that it is the infrastructure of the internet that's been built over the last 30 or 40 years. And instead of looking at 2D content, you're now moving to 3D everything. And you're consuming all this content using VR, AR type devices. So it's an immersive experience, right? I think that's the easy way to understand the metaverse, because I think there's too many different people who are maybe confusing the matter. And I also want to highlight that the metaverse and the Web3 phenomenon are actually two separate, but some intersecting trends, where some people actually put the two and they conflate the two concepts. So back to the slide that you showed earlier. So, you know, the metaverse is not something that is going to replace the internet, right? It is really not something that will make the internet go away. It actually is something that enhances and expands the internet that we have today, right? You know, right now on the internet, you know, we have a unique ID for every single website or every single app that we use, and we have our profile pic that represents us. In this future metaverse, we essentially have a universal ID that goes with us, as well as a potential universal avatar that represents us in these various virtual worlds. Instead of visiting websites and apps, you actually spend your time in virtual worlds and virtual experiences that, you know, that surrounds you. Instead of looking at the kind of 1D and 2D content today of text, audio, pictures, and video, we move to a 3D immersive experience, whether it's computer generated or it's you know, videos. They're all, you know, essentially surrounds you. And the type of content, instead of short videos and live streaming, we actually move to live streaming and virtual idols, where you know, some of the influencers of the future are not going to do, you know, 5-second streams. They're probably going to do 24/7 streams where they're streaming their lives to people. And instead of going to a website just to consume, which is what we most of our time what we do, relatively little interaction and then some rating or, you know, liking of other people's content, we're actually going to have a fully engaging, immersive experience. And in some cases, we're inhabiting some of these virtual worlds. There are apps right now where people are spending maybe 5 or 10 hours a day spending time in these virtual worlds. There are probably a small number of people doing that today, but in the long term, people will probably spend as much time, waking hours, in these virtual worlds as they spend in the physical world, waking hours in the physical world. So I would imagine people are going to spend somewhere between, you know, probably 8 to 10 hours a day in these kind of experiences in the near future. Today, we're using the PC, the tablet, the phone as the main consumption devices. But in the near future, we're going to move to XR, VR, AR devices and glasses that will be on you all day, that allows you to instantly jump in and out of these virtual and real life experiences. And instead of using the current, you know, 2D screens, keyboards, and mouse that we've been trained to use for the last, you know, 30 years, we're going to move to full natural interfaces. I think that's something that is really important, is that it will allow accessibility to essentially all ages, as well as all levels of technology savviness, where essentially you're using your hands, your eyes, your mouth, your full body as a way to interact in these virtual worlds, not just, you know, knowing how to code or using keyboards or knowing how to type. Business models are going to change a little bit. Right now, most of the internet is very ads driven, or they're selling content, selling games, or, you know, you're doing e-commerce, buying physical goods in a virtual, in a online environment. We're going to move to more virtual commerce, buying virtual goods. And then I think there's going to be a new concept called live to earn, right? Right now, there's something that in the last year or two that's really popped up called play to earn, where you're essentially playing games, creating characters, creating, you know, virtual objects that then you resell to other people. I think more and more people are going to start moving into having their employment actually be online, and they're not needing to leave their home to be able to have a career and to be able to be a virtual teacher or virtual guide or a virtual companion or virtual entertainer, and be able to have their entire subsistence be supported through online means. We're going to probably start moving from purely fiat currency and in-game currency, which right now every single in-game currency are all wall gardens that only works in their own game. We're going to move to universal wallets and the universal currency and I guess NFT type mechanisms for doing universal ownership validation, so that you can actually bring goods across different virtual worlds very easily. And we're going to move away from these independent walled gardens into interconnected open worlds. I think that's something that is more of an ideal. It's going to take time to get there, but that's really where the long-term value of this is that we can move to a place where we essentially can jump into any space that we want to instantly through these new glasses or headset devices. And instead of just collecting likes and followers to create our own personal satisfaction or status, we're going to be collecting memories, because every experience we have will actually create real memories in our brain, just like we do in the real world. And we're going to collect real friendships. I've made a lot of friends in VR experiences that I've never met in person, but I feel like we're so connected because I've done a lot of activities with them in an immersive experience together. So if you think about it, this is actually very much like the real life. So IRL or in real life, almost all the aspects that we're talking about of what describes the activities and behaviors and the ways of how we interact in the metaverse is very much what we actually do already today in the real world. So by moving the digital world from a 2D internet to a 3D internet of the metaverse, we're actually making the digital world more real and making our interactions a lot more real. So I think that was something I just wanted to share with the group here. And I don't know, Rebeca, how you want to move forward with the rest of our time.
Well, I thought that was a great explanation, and maybe the first time I ever really understood it.
Ah, great.
I don't know if some of the audience members feel the same way, but you explained it so well, and I can see how it's going to impact so many elements of our life, how we work, how we play, how we have friendships. And, I guess it's maybe the first time I actually felt a little excited about the metaverse as well.
That's actually good to know. In fact, so you did ask me to say a little bit about what we're doing. So I added this slide. Which a lot of people may know HTC more as a phone company, but over about 6-7 years ago, we've transitioned into becoming essentially a VR focus. We're all in on VR, on XR, and right now the top 3 devices in the VR space, whether you're talking about the professional level grade product, is our Vive Pro 2. Our Vive Focus 3 is the leading, highest performing AIO all-in-one device. Mm-hmm. And then also the first immersive glasses device was just launched by us about 3-4 weeks ago. And by the way, the 2 devices on the right are actually using Qualcomm chips. So I'm sure your last speaker, Nan, would be happy that we're talking about these devices. So just to give a little bit of background on how we're involved. In fact, even beyond being a hardware manufacturer, we actually do a lot of other things in this whole metaverse ecosystem. We have the only open app store that is available to every single manufacturer out there. In fact, pretty much all of the major manufacturers in China are using HTC Vive as their major app store. We also have arts programs where we're taking museums and galleries art content from around the world, 50 plus projects that we've taken from the real world to make it more virtual so that it's accessible. The best art and amazing history in the world can be accessible in places like the Tate Museum, the Smithsonian, the Museum of Natural History, the Chinese Imperial Palace Museum, etc. They're all their content. The Louvre actually is also, their content is also put into our arts program.
What's Alvin? What's the killer app for VR for the metaverse? What's the killer app?
I think there's a lot of people ask this question, and honestly, I think the killer app is something that depends on the user. So if you're, let's say, if you're a teacher, being able to take your students on a field trip every day and letting them be able to learn history or science through an immersive way, that's a really killer app, right? And the classes that's done in VR, the students come out so excited and they want to keep coming back. You know, if you're a fitness fanatic, people are using this to stay fit and lose weight. And it's something that they can sustain. In fact, we found that it is 3 or 4 times easier to sustain an exercise program if you're using VR than it is with a normal gym program. You know, so if you're a white collar professional, to be able to do virtual meetings on a daily basis with your team, even though they're thousands of miles away, that's actually a killer app. We use that internally for our own team to keep in touch with each other. So there's just so many things I think that could be killer apps.
It sounds like that's going to escalate the whole remote working trend.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I don't know if you heard, but Accenture last year bought 60,000 VR devices for their new employee onboarding, because as you can imagine, you know, anybody that's joined a major company in the last year and a half have probably never been to the office and have probably never seen the rest of their team face to face. So having a VR experience to allow people to onboard, to be able to have their weekly meetings in an immersive experience actually helps to create that team togetherness that is missing in Zoom type experiences only.
Okay. What do you think of Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse? It's a closed metaverse, isn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I understand why he does it, and I understand, you know, the business model of Facebook and Meta to essentially use ads and information of your customer as their main business model. But I think the promise of the metaverse should be something that is completely open, that anybody can join, something that you can use any device to join, not just ones that are branded under Oculus. You know, something that you don't need to have a Facebook ID or a Meta ID to join, right? So I understand why he does it from a business perspective, but from a social and moral perspective, you know, I think we need to be able to take that promise and make it a lot more open.
I see. Do you think that we're going to see a standardization on one specific token for the metaverse?
I think it's going to take a lot of time, but hopefully, if it does, if we can have a common, you know, currency or a common NFT model for asset validation, I think that would actually help the interoperability a lot more. In fact, I do have a slide about kind of the phases. Well, actually, let me quickly go through a little bit about what else we're doing, because I think a lot of people don't understand.
We have a few minutes left. So.
Oh, yes, okay. So I guess I should just mention that, you know, we do so much things in the whole ecosystem to try to enable this to happen, because we don't want to have a closed internet, a closed metaverse.
Right.
You know, we're invested in hundreds of companies. We've created an open operating system for other vendors to use. We've created event systems. We actually created a blockchain phone to allow people to have their own blockchain assets and currencies in a more secure manner.
So which is your most important product coming out of the metaverse? Which is the most dynamic, the most important, the highest potential?
I mean, I think our main product is really providing the interface, right? The hardware devices that people use to go in. I think that's our biggest contribution. But you know, our ability to provide the open app store and the content library, I think it is really key.
So what about innovations around the headset? I mean, I don't think people really want to walk around with those headsets on.
Well, this is exactly what I was saying, is that we're moving into new form factors, just like the glasses, the Vive Flow we just launched. It's only 180 grams. It's essentially like a sunglasses type form factor that people can wear, and it doesn't tie into you don't have to have a wire connected to a PC for it to work. So
Right.
that's really what I think will open things up. Going back to your question about kind of how do you think the metaverse is going to develop over the next few years? Over the next kind of 1 to 5 years, there's going to be a lot of different independent wall garden vendor-driven metaverse kind of mini metaverses, right? Depending on which vendor you're talking about, and they will all claim to be metaverses, but none of them will actually be kind of the actual metaverse. I think in the midterm, kind of the 2 to 7 year time frame, different regions will start to enforce regulation to create that unity, that interoperability that people are looking for. In fact, I think China will probably be the first market to enable a full national level metaverse experience, because they are able to create quickly regulation and enforce quickly and have adoption by all the vendors that operate in that country.
Is the adoption higher in China?
I think the adoption rate for new technology is higher in China for just about everything out there, right? I mean, it moved to mobile very quickly, and moved to the mobile payments, and the new energy, electric rail, pretty much EVs, everything. And over the last 10 or 15 years, adoption has happened faster in China than just about any other place in the world. But I think long term, once the different regions have their own regulations, they will find a way to interoperate. There may not be one single currency, but there will be ways of bridges to be able to allow them to interoperate. Just like we do today, we have ability to exchange currencies between countries. There's going to be kind of regions of the metaverse. Long term, I would think 5 to 10 year mark, I would like to see a lot more interoperability where we do agree on common standards for identity, common standards for currency, common standards for how child protection, privacy protection, security of your identity, etc. So I think there's going to be in fact also advertising regulation, because I think the metaverse medium is so powerful that it can influence you to do just about anything. If it's used incorrectly. If it's used correctly, it can also be used to educate you the right information about just about anything very quickly. So we really need to be very careful how advertising is conducted in this medium. So, but
okay, Alvin, that was great. Such a great explanation, and so much potential that you've outlined here. And I wish we had more time. Maybe when we get back to our live events, we'll come back to China and get you on stage again there, and then broadcast it out to the world.
Yes,
thank you so much, Alvin.
No, thanks again for inviting me, and good luck with the rest of the day.
Sorry we don't have more time.
No, this is great. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So we are next moving to Indonesia, and then we have Eddy Chan here, and he's with Intudo Ventures, who's here in Silicon Valley. We have Fang from Kargo in Indonesia, and then we are supposed to have one more person who's joining us, and I think he should be on soon. So let's launch into this. Eddy, you're the founding partner of Intudo Ventures, which is the Indonesian only venture fund, and you started in 2017, and now you've raised a third fund of 115 million. And we're going to be talking today about some of your really cool investments and some of the unicorns that you're helping to create in the Indonesian market. So I think Southeast Asia is really seeing a lot of activity from Indonesia. And so we wanted to bring you on and to highlight what's happening in Indonesia, which is a huge population market, as well as a leading tech market. So Eddy, why don't you say a few words about why you are doing Indonesia only venture fund, and how it's going.
Yeah, well, thanks, Rebecca. Thanks again for having me. I've certainly enjoyed following you since my time in China from 2000 to 2012, covering that market in venture capital, as
Oh,
well as
sure.
previously in Silicon Valley. So, yeah, on the Indonesian market, for us, I think it's just a function of having been involved in many ecosystems, right? So Silicon Valley, since the 1990s, certainly had the privilege to back a lot of incredible companies like PayPal, and then all the companies founded by their founders, like Affirm, call it Palantir, call it SpaceX. Thereafter, I had the opportunity to really cover the Chinese market. And I think for the Indonesian market, I really found it certainly, almost by way of serendipity, in that my clients started looking at the Indonesian market in 2010, say Goldman Sachs, Credit Suisse, kind of et cetera. But I thought it was relatively early, to be frank. At the time, there's about 7 million people on the internet. Well, fast forward 10 years later, we're at 200 some million people on the internet, probably the fastest growing internet country in the world on a year over year basis on 19%. So certainly a lot of the macro factors, and also just by chance, I'd say 6-7 years ago when I was transitioning out of my role as a founder of a technology company in Silicon Valley, a close friend of mine in Hong Kong connected me with his college roommate, who happens to be my co-founder today, who had set up Goldman Sachs' private equity venture capital practice back in 2011. And I think it was, a lot of his insights, having met him in 2016, spending a couple years with him running money and balance sheet. We were very lucky to deploy into some funds as well as into some startups back then, including Gojek, et cetera. And really saw on the back of that, had the fortune to really build our firm since 2017. So, as you had mentioned today, we run, over $200 million. I've been really privileged to back some of the, biggest, and best companies in market, with some of the folks online today, with Zhou over at Zendit, of course, and Tiger over here at Kargo.
Yeah, no, they're both really interesting companies, and I think that they show the diversity of the kind of technology that's coming from Indonesia in fintech infrastructure, and then in the Uber of trucks. So that's Kargo, that's Tiger's company, and he's got his trucks behind him in the frame there. I'd love to hear more about Kargo and the Uber of trucks. And I know you were actually at Uber Asia before. So Tiger, tell us all about Kargo.
Thanks, Rebecca, for that intro, and thanks for Eddy for giving us sort of the context and the backdrop of Indonesia's sort of tech ecosystem. So my name is Tiger. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Kargo Technologies. I think the very, very simplified way to think about it, it's Uber, but for big trucks, and it's a consumer, it's just the businesses. And so we serve businesses both big and small, all the way from the biggest FMCG, companies like Unilever, Procter & Gamble, here in Indonesia, all the way down to the smallest wholesalers and distributors of those said products to the small little micro corner stores, what we call waruns here in Indonesia. I think just taking a step back, my experience and my just a little bit about my history is I set up Uber here in Indonesia, as well in Southeast Asia, several different countries, including Thailand, Malaysia. I actually spent a couple of years in China with Uber. I launched a lot of second-tier cities in China, and I ended up being the Western China regional manager for Uber before our merger with Eddy. And after that, I came back to Southeast Asia and ran Uber for Indonesia before our merger with Grab, and before taking the Uber Indonesia team to set up Kargo. And I just think I think there's a lot to be said about the internet users over the past 10 years, but I think a lot of what we do is still very rooted in the offline and this conversion from the offline to the online. And I think just to put things into a little bit of perspective, Indonesia spends about a quarter of its GDP on logistics. If you compare that versus the US or some of the developed countries that your audience might be used to, in Singapore and Japan, it's all single digits. So we have a long way to go before the efficiency of Indonesia's logistics system really catches up with the developed world. And I think that's really holding a lot of things back. Number one, obviously, is e-commerce. And the cost of delivering packages and parcels throughout Indonesia's geography. Indonesia is famously known for the 17,000 islands here. It's the fourth most populous country in the world. But when we look at it from a topography perspective, there's three major islands that make up about 60%, 70% of the economic output of Indonesia, and that's Java Island, Sumatra, and Bali. And I think hopefully most of you guys would have heard Bali. I've actually gotten some really interesting questions about Indonesia, and they're like, hey, Indonesia, is that in Bali? Real question that I was asked. And I think that logistics cost is really caused by a couple of different things, and I'll probably spend a lot of time. I can probably spend a lot of time, the whole hour, talking about this, but it's really because there's a lack of infrastructure, which I think we're investing in. It's really following in the footsteps of the U.S. back in after World War II, in China back in let's say 20, 30 years, right? Investing in infrastructure. We're putting about $500 billion investing in new roads and new seaports and airports. And the second part of that, and I think this is really where Kargo comes in, is building the digital infrastructure. Trucks in Indonesia, they're about 80% sort of empty when we look at their backhauls. And so no matter how many roads you build, right, even if your trucks are coming back empty all the time, your efficiency is still really, really underutilized and your prices are still up. So we think about things like, hey, we want to make sure that all of the trucks that you see behind us, we don't own assets, we're super asset light. We bring them onto our platform, we have a driver app that gets installed into every single truck. And drivers and small trucking companies can go into our platform and find jobs back. If they have an empty trip, or if they need jobs because their businesses or regular business because of COVID has taken a hit. And so that's a little short blurb about Kargo.
Did you benchmark against any other company internationally, for instance?
Yeah, great question. I think this digitalization of trucking and logistics is something that we always thought of as, this is not a question of if, but a question of when. So I look at the three biggest countries by population, that's the US, India, and China. And there's, tons of sort of peers in that group. There's Convoy, Uber Freight in the US. There's FTA, which is Mangbang, which is run public in China. And obviously there's in India, there's Blackbuck and Rebeca. So these are kind of proven sort of use cases and companies and technology companies that have scaled in their respective countries in this industry.
And your startup actually just became a unicorn, right?
Maybe in Indonesian rupiah, but that would be not yet, but soon.
Not yet. Okay.
Soon I hope. But I think Zhou and Zendit has.
Zendit is a unicorn company. Okay, that's a good entree to Zhou then. Zhou, tell us about the becoming a unicorn company, and you're going to need to unmute yourself to tell us.
Yeah, sure. Well, hey everyone, thanks so much for making the time, and thank you, Rebecca, especially for and Eddy for having Zendit on as a panelist. Apologies, Moses couldn't make it last minute. He let me know just about a half hour before the start of the meeting that he couldn't make it.
We know the startups in Asia are able to handle these kind of quick switches, so no big deal, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of thinking on your feet and just being ready for anything, anytime. So
right.
All part of the game. So Zendit's
well, speaking of which.
Yeah, did you want me to give a little more about Zendit?
No, go ahead with Zendit. Yeah, please.
Oh, all right. So Zendit started in 2015 in Indonesia as originally a Venmo, or sort of a peer-to-peer payments platform for Indonesians. That was the initial idea. And then we pivoted in 2016 to become a payment gateway, which is a company that helps businesses send and receive money, right? So maybe you've heard of Stripe or Braintree or Adyen or these kinds of companies. And we pivoted because we noticed that a lot of businesses started asking us, like, hey, since you have this e-wallet and you need to let people withdraw their money and top up their money, can you help us with the same? We need to send money, we need to accept money. So that sort of led to us pivoting and dropping our peer-to-peer payments app from the App Store in mid-2016 and pivoting full to a payment service provider. That was about 5 years ago. I myself, I met Zendit when they were 4 people. They were actually still just the founders. They were just finishing up Y Combinator, and I had met Moses about 2 weeks after he moved to Indonesia. And I joined, I kind of hung out. I was already in Indonesia doing some consulting, and I joined a year later when we were about 20 people. So that was over 5 years ago now, and can hopefully
no regrets.
Not at all. It's a ridiculous journey. I mean, it personally for me, it was the first proper startup that I had worked in, and it was my first experience, and I had made the choice to take about a 70% pay cut from consulting to just join these guys working out of the living room. Turned out to be definitely one of the best decisions I think I've ever made.
first startup and in an emerging market as well. I mean, Eddy, would you say that Indonesia is an emerging market or not, or is it already emerged?
Well, no, I still think, things are moving along. I mean, if I were to look back at when we got started, as a firm in 2017, I kid you not, there's a grand total of 15 Indonesian homegrown companies with a valuation over 25 million. That's like 2 meters in San Francisco or a meter in China. I think 2 years later in 2019, that expanded to 30 some companies with a valuation over 25 million. I would say today in 2021, it's probably like 70 to 80 companies, of which maybe half of them have a valuation over $100 million. So certainly I think we're still early days. I mean, we're starting to see the next generation of founders that are kind of spinning out of, call it Grab, Gojek, C that we've had the fortune to back. So it's really, it's really exciting times. And I think we're still really, but, definitely in the world's eyes, I think certainly getting more popular. I mean, I think today at Intudo, we have 30 some of the top growth funds in the world invest in our firm or the partners. And I think half of them have written checks into Indonesia. So I think it is catching the world's eye as we're seeing firms with Indonesia exposure, see Limited, Grab, Bukalapak, et cetera, lists. So as we see more exits, I think that we'll see more capital come in the market, and it is catching the eye of even downstream now. Certainly a lot of the top venture funds are, in their first checks or two in the market the last 4 years. And two companies on this call.
I'm sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just saying, many of the firms that we work closely with, partner with us on many of the companies here today. Certainly with with Kargo as well as with Zendit. So yeah, it's really, really exciting times, and I really have to credit the entrepreneurs, the Zhous, the Tigers of the world for putting Indonesia on the world stage. It's are doing their work.
No, it's not easy. There's a lot of risk involved. I think in an emerging market in a startup, so I did notice that there are a number of international VCs that are joining you as co-investors in these funds or in these startups, like Sequoia India joined, and then Tenaya Capital joined, and several others as well. So do you think that that's going to be an ongoing trend? And then I have a follow-up question about that too, because I saw that happen in China, where you had this escalation of VC and international VCs coming in, and then you saw the tech innovation coming out of China, original innovation. Do you see those same kind of trends playing out in Indonesia now?
Yeah, well, I can answer both of those questions. I guess question one, in terms of global funds, taking a look into the market, I think this really is reminiscent of my time in China. I covered the Chinese market from 2000 to 2012 when I was based in Shanghai, Beijing, Hong Kong. And looking back, Sina, Sohu, and Eddy's went public in the year 2000 in the United States in large part. And I think that gave people a flavor. And then in 2003, C-Trip went public. And I think it was only after that in 03, 04, Dick Ramlick, a lot of the Valley VCs made their maiden voyages, to China. And it was really 04, 05, 06, where many of these firms then set up shop, right? Called Sequoia China, or, which I used to cover, called Matrix, Kleiner Perkins, Axel, kind of you name it, right? And I think that similarly, if I were to look at, the trajectory we've seen in market, I really started seeing that, the big guys, the KKRs, et cetera, were already in market. But I would say, post, call it 2016, 17 with the C Limited IPO, would put maybe Indonesia, Southeast Asia on world stage. You started seeing a lot of the many firms starting opening up shop, right? Many of which are partners with us, whether it be GGV, Sequoia has been, open in Singapore some time, call it, and, except DST, everyone opening up their offices, call it circa 2018, 19, 2020. So we've certainly seen that. And I think that's very encouraging. When we started in 2017, to be frank, it was very kind of unclear who's going to lead your kind of Series A or Series B if we took the early stage risk. But I think today you have a full stack of capital, where I'd argue capital almost is getting to be a commodity. So I would say that that's very good, I think, for all of us. I think it's pretty exciting. And now I think for all funds, they have to be very differentiated, not just be a capital provider, but be very clear kind of what are the deliverables they're offering. Now, in terms of innovation, I would say, I think to say that there's not innovation, I think that it goes, the world is pretty, it's not just, Indonesia learning from, call it, China, from India, from US, or even from other emerging venture markets, call it LATAM in Africa. Like we've done businesses that started in Nigeria, Pakistan, Mexico, and Turkey, and then came Indonesia, or vice versa. So I think it's a lot of global sharing. I'm always really hesitant to say what are best practices, and I think that if you say the cut and paste model certainly hasn't worked. We've seen that. I always describe it as like the Vietnam War. The United States had unlimited technology and capital, but guess what? Who won, right? So ultimately, I think a lot of business that require a lot of ground game, a lot of regulatory, et cetera, I think that it has to be hyper localized in all respects, and it's non-trivial just to run a cut and paste. And so we're not seeing that. If I look at Zendit, I look at Kargos, I think I think
Right.
some founders sometimes they want to simplify it for the general, but in reality, these businesses do a lot more. It's not just Stripe, Zendit Stripe. You know, Zendit does Stripe, what Stripe does what Square does. I mean, it's full
Right.
list. Look at Kargo, same thing, right? Trucking, then we got lending product and everything. So I
So
think
are
it's
you
a lot.
really, yeah. Are you really into Indonesia 2.0 now? There was Indonesia 1.0, which kind
That's
of
for
blew up during the
1.0. I mean,
1970s. I remember that very well because I've been to Indonesia a couple of times and around that whole time as well, the 1997 currency crisis. So,
sure.
so you're on Indonesia 2.0. Is it smooth sailing or not?
No, I mean, I think like every market, I mean, there's a lot of learnings. There's a lot of stakeholders to please, right? And that we got to work closely with, whether it be on the government side, on the regulatory side. I think on the family-owned conglomerate side, it is, you know, we feel a country in large part dominated by 1,500 core families, 30 of which, you know, we're privileged to have as LPs in the fund. And then, of course, you know, you have so there's multiple stakeholders, and I think that digitization, like, you know, what Zendit, what you know, Tiger are doing here. This is a country with a 0% technology weighting on the local stock exchange as of the summer of 2017, where, you know, a lot of second, third generation owners were tasked by their mom, dad, aunt, or uncle with really digitizing their family-owned platform, whether that be in, you know, consumer goods, whether that be in retail, whether that be in banking. And, you know, even you know, post Bukalapak IPO, I think it's still only at 5%. So we're very, very early days is my feedback. And that's where I think all the excitement is. At Intudo, you know, really we're a, you know, very heavily B2B focused firm, or at most B2B2C. We're not very 2C firm, as we're really focused on, you know, finding firms that, you know, that have clients that have operational dependency on them.
Okay, very good. With two great examples here with Zendit and with Kargo. And congratulations for all your work and the success of these two startups as they scale up. We will continue to watch them and hopefully have you back on again for our Ask a VC program. So thank you. And I think we have to move on now.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Tiger.
Thank you again.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. All right, moving right along. As I said, our next panelists are eager to take the stage, and I'm going to be introducing them in a moment here. We have David Kaufman, who's going to be moderating this session. He's the Director of Global Strategies at Nixon Peabody. And hi, David. And then we have, along with him, we have two crypto companies from Singapore. And we have Yulong Liu, Managing Director of Global Partnerships at Babel Finance out of Singapore and Hong Kong. And we have Jeff Mee, Head of Global Strategy at Huobi Global out of Singapore. I think we all are anxious to hear about what's happening in crypto, and particularly this Asia angle and the whole regulatory angle as well. So David, I know that Jeff, I saw him on earlier, so let's get back, Jeff. And okay, everyone's here.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, all right.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. It's great
David,
to
to
be here virtually. I'm in Silicon Valley.
It's all yours.
Yeah. So it's exciting to hear. You know, I think these sessions have evolved from just simply talking about China, which clearly is still very important to all of us. But we're also talking about other parts of the world, including Singapore and Indonesia and Malaysia. So I think that's incredibly interesting and a great evolution for the Silicon Dragon brand as you continue to go across the world, hopefully in person soon rather than virtual.
Sure.
We'll see. But really delighted to have two trailblazers in the crypto space. And in the kind of this new cutting edge financial space, we have Jeff Mee from Huobi Global, and then Yulong Liu from Babel Finance. So I had a little chance to talk with them earlier. Very interesting businesses. Really excited to get their take on things. I myself run the firm's a big international law firm, and I run the firm's global practice, working with companies all over the world, helping folks from the U.S. do business all over the globe, about 140 different countries, and helping those folks do business here in the U.S. So I know a little bit about this space. We have a bit of a crypto practice and have done a lot of work with some really interesting international crypto companies, but would love to hear more. So Jeff, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about your company and what you're looking to do in the future, and how you see the market for crypto developing more generally.
Yeah, great. Thank you for the intro, David. Yeah, so I'm Jeff, and I'm head of global strategy. So what this entails is pretty much, creating go-to-market strategies and bringing our products into different markets around the world, right? So Huobi's a little earlier player in crypto. We started in 2013. We've been around for 8 years, which is a lifetime in the crypto industry. So what we want to do is we have about 23, 24 different products, main products, right? Including such as asset management, public blockchain, obviously derivatives, spot trading, MT marketplace, all this type of stuff. And we want to see how to bring it to market, how to bring it to different countries to let these users, enjoy the perks of crypto and blockchain, right? So we have users in 130 countries right now. We have major hubs in about 20, 30 countries right now. It depends what you define as a hub. Some of them have 30, 40 people. Some hubs only have around 10 people, right? So right now we're just, what Huobi's doing is we're really trying to see how we can expand globally, which markets, have more favorable regulatory conditions, which markets need the products we have. For example, in some markets, they really focus on derivatives trading or asset management or custody. Some markets, such as in Southeast Asia, they really focus on, more user consumer products, such as, GameFi, NFT marketplace, or even just basic fiat gateway, trading fiat to cryptocurrencies. So we're really focusing on, aligning our products and services to the right markets and giving people exactly what they want. The easiest.
What are your key markets currently, and where do you think?
Our key markets right now, we're focused on Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Vietnam. We have a large presence in Turkey. We're fully licensed in Japan and Korea, and then obviously we're based in Singapore right now. So these are huge ones. Plus Brazil, Russia, they're on our horizon, our trajectory. It's a little bit more difficult to get into those markets just because we've been operating in Asia for so long. There's going to be some operational obstacles, but we're really building out our resources there. So you're going to see us in Europe, Brazil, South America, Russia very, very soon.
What about the United States? What about the United States?
We love the US. No, we have in the US we have obviously regulatory, right? Regulatory is the main word when you think about the US. We have our trust license out there. We're based out in Nevada. And then so we can have custodial products and trust products out there in the US, but we're still, thinking about what's the best way to, bring our other things there, our other services. And yeah, outlook for the future. I'm always bullish. If you ask me, I'm always bullish. I think it's a great start. I think with Web 3.0, with everyone's talking about NFTs and the Metaverse. I think it's not just a buzzword. It's actually bringing people closer to the digital world, right? Putting crypto or NFTs or digital assets and products in people's hands. I think that's bringing everyone one step closer. I think. When it's almost like user education. If you buy NFT, you're kind of working with some wallets, you're working with some, MetaMask or whatever. You're getting closer, you're learning, and then that's going to lead to higher crypto adoption.
And being based in Singapore, how do you see the Singapore market as being a great place to be from, and Singapore as being embracing cryptocurrency? I think I read somewhere where some huge percentage of Singaporeans have some crypto in their portfolios.
Yeah. A couple years ago, well, let's say a couple years ago, right? When China was going through some regulatory concerns, a lot of people were coming to Singapore for ICOs. This was back in the day. And then, so at that time, they were already early adopters of crypto and new projects and, the ICO mechanisms, stuff like that, right? So there's always been this presence here. Singapore as a hub is more of an operational strategic move. Singapore is very centralized. You can head to different areas of Southeast Asia very easily. For example, Thailand, Vietnam, other areas. Obviously, Singapore is a very large financial hub in Asia in general. There's a lot of talent here. There's a lot of, infrastructure already built out. So it's more of a strategic decision. Singapore as a market, it's very easy. If you just walk around Singapore, you can see crypto ads everywhere. Crypto companies are competitors. They have ads. People are familiar. People are very educated. They're very accustomed to working with crypto.
Well, we're seeing a lot more crypto ads in the United States now. I think Matt Damon's on every sporting event that I watch I have to see Matt Damon give his, fortune favors the brave speech, which is a little bit creepy. But let's move over to Yulong. I think it's exciting. I read a little bit about Babel, and I guess I thought it was interesting that one of your founders, when he first heard about crypto, I think he said it looked untrustworthy. But he has now changed his tune, and you're a little bit newer, but you're doing some exciting things. So Yulong, let's tell us a little bit about the trustworthy business that you guys are in at Babel Finance.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, David. Thanks, Rebecca, for inviting us. Very glad to join the panel. I think we are a relatively new firm, right, compared to Huobi, as Jeff mentioned. And then we purely focus on institutions. That's also different than most of our peers. So at the moment, we measure about $8 billion in assets. We only work with 200 institutional clients. What we try to do is to minimize our product offerings. Actually, it's in contrast to what Huobi tries to do. We only does crypto asset management, and we does crypto lending. So and then we only do 3 coins at the moment: BTC, Ethereum, and the stable coins. That's mostly because of our the background of our clients, given their institutional focus. They only work with the majors. So at the moment, we have over 110 people globally, mostly, primarily focused on Pan Asia, where the people sit across Hong Kong and Singapore. We are seeking for full compliance in Singapore, and then we got licensed in the US, in Europe, for asset management and the money service business. So into the future, especially after what happened in 2021, we are pretty excited for the institutional markets in crypto in general, right? We see a lot of healthy flow from the family offices as well as private enterprises with their mindsets. How shall they manage their balance sheets in regards with this new upcoming asset class? So we are here trying to build a bridge and build an infrastructure to help them allocate.
So, you're dealing with, folks that may not be as familiar with crypto. What's your biggest challenge in kind of like what happens when you walk into this room with a bunch of bankers who, are wearing suits and probably still pay things in cash? How do you convince them that crypto is the way to go, and you guys are the right partner?
No, I think there are 2 types of institutions, right? I mean, number one is the end customers. I'm talking about private enterprises and family offices and all those. In those regards, they actually they're getting much more knowledgeable, right? This question that you ask is a primer. It's a primer. Oh, what is this asset? How should they treat volatility, et cetera, but they have genuine interest. Right, there's another type of institutions like the bankers, like the banking groups, insurance companies, or even the service provider auditors. Right, so they came in to really seek for educations. Right, they are forced by their own customers to learn about this new asset class, and then we are considered as one of the specialists in the group. So they always want to get some opinions from us. And in terms of challenges, I think it's really about, we sit in Asia. As you can probably see, there's a divergence of regulatory sort of friendliness, right, in between the East and the West. We used to be headquartered in Hong Kong. Now we are trying to do a dual headquarter focus. Is because as part of the regulation change in China, I think Hong Kong or maybe Singapore is becoming much more friendly than Hong Kong, and then US is much more friendly than Singapore. So I think the regulatory hurdle is what we are always being asked by a lot of institutional investors. And then as we speak, the current local regulatory landscape is still evolving. We don't have a clear answer yet, right? I mean, there's 2 or 3 sort of fully licensed regulatory players in Singapore at the moment, but we expect that number to expand pretty quickly into the new year. So I think by mid of this year, we should be in a pretty good position to answer a lot of those challenges now.
So it sounds like Singapore is a pretty crowded market. We heard from Jeff where he's looking to expand geographically. So what can you answer, like where do you see your expansion, both geographic and also where do you see, you're going to move beyond the 3 coins? Do you have some other ideas about some different products you're interested in selling in the future?
Yeah, I think we like to be pretty focused. To be honest, I think we think financial services is a service industry, right? It needs a little bit of human touch. So we want to be localized in Pan Asia, right? That includes North Asia and a lot of Southeast Asia and Australia. But with that said, we have some partners who we intend to serve emerging countries with, right? That includes Latin America, part of Africa, maybe East Europe. So very selective markets. We still want to be focused the way we are because we are relatively small startup, right? Comparing to Huobi, we only have 110 people. So we like to be pretty focused still. Um, in terms of product itself, so crypto lending is our bread and butter. We are probably one of the largest crypto lenders here in Asia, and maybe globally. Asset management is one of the things. We will consider expand the coin offerings though, because given the past 3 years of the company establishment, I think there's a lot more what we used to consider as altcoin, right? Becomes pretty major now. So we see a lot of institutional interest in those assets, and then given these guys are our core clients, so we will consider to expand the offering beyond BTC, Ethereum, and stablecoins. So that's gonna happen in Q1 this year.
Great. Jeff, when we talked last, we talked a little bit about NFTs and how that plays into your business strategy. Can you tell our folks what you guys and where you think NFTs are going?
Yeah, sure. Well, for one, we launched our NFT marketplace, right? And it's how we're different from other NFT marketplaces is we want to really link it into our ecosystem, right? I mentioned earlier that Huobi is not just an exchange, not just a derivatives or spot trading platform. It's an entire ecosystem with different products, with public blockchains, wallets, we link it all together, right? So NFTs is really, I think, a key component in GameFi, right? We really want to be developing GameFi and game development in the future, right? We have a couple different games such as like Play-Doh Farm. We've been invested in Next Type, Dio, Decimated. NFTs are products in the game, right? Or items or collectibles that people use. And why they're so important is because by owning NFTs, by owning one of these game products or game items, we give users ownership, right? And I think within the whole crypto world, it's all about giving people ownership, letting them being a part of it. I think that's what the metaverse is. It's like by entering the metaverse, you're giving people a part of something. They're being involved. They're connected, right? And I think NFTs are a really good bridge for that.
Pretty exciting. So Rebecca, I hear there's a lot of connections between this and the talk we heard about what the metaverse is going to be with the virtual wallet. Do you guys see, or I don't know if you guys heard that, but do you see, you're playing in this metaverse era with virtual wallets?
Yeah. I mean, I think wallets in general, wallets are kind of the entryway, right? People's entryways into the crypto world, right? It allows them to own digital assets. It allows them to connect to the world. It allows them to transfer assets. So whether it's, a cloud wallet, a physical wallet, or even a virtual wallet, I think it serves the same purpose, right? It's about connecting people. It's about holding storage. It's necessary. It's a portal.
Yulong, how do you guys see wallets? I know you have a different model with more institutional investors, but how do you see wallets impacting your business going forward?
So there are two types of wallets, right? There's a mass wallets that is catering to the retails, and then there's another sort of type of more institutional focused wallets that people are focused very much on the ownership of private key, right, delegation of access or those. So we certainly focus on the second layer, and also second layer also includes tax reporting, right, proper reporting of transactions, etc. Whereas I think the first one, the mass market wallets, focus on easy of access, right? I don't think a lot of people will know how to manage the private keys. So a lot of those wallets seem to be centralized, and then some of the wallets you can log in with your email address. It's pretty ironic. I mean, whereas crypto was intended for focusing on sort of asset ownership, right? You're supposed to own your own wallets, but I guess there's a huge hurdle for mass market to understand that. I think, am I still here? Hello?
Yep, you're still.
Oh, sorry. I think we gotta ask a lot by family offices, individuals, right, who used to have a huge passion in art, right? They continue to do so, and NFT is one of the drivers to push them into this market. So I think I have to echo with what Jeff said earlier. I think NFT is really a grabbing point, right, to attract people into this market. And after they get into the idea of NFT, what's non-fungible, what's blockchain, and then they can expand their thinking towards, oh, should they, beyond buying crypto art, right, should they consider to buy some crypto as an asset, as a financial assets? So we see a lot of inflows, and I think that has to be one of the major drivers for what happened last year, right? You see the massive increase in wallet accounts. I think these are all beneficiary to the market development in general.
So when is crypto going to go mass?
I think it is. It's mass already.
Is it?
Yeah, I think they said earlier, right? Matt Damon is speaking on our behalf already.
The Staples Center is no longer the Staples Center. It's now the crypto something,
That
center.
includes the Miami Heat stadium as well.
So are all of you, the three of you, using crypto all the time? Half the time?
We're trading.
I'm not going to
We're
answer that
trading.
question.
How about those in the audience? So you got everyone there using crypto all the time? No, I think it certainly.
I think the difference is whether you're adding crypto to your portfolios, and I think that's the difference. I mean, I have to say that when I'm going back to the office, I sometimes ride the ferry boat, and there was this incredibly long conversation with like 10 other folks on the ferry boat, all talking about how they're buying their crypto, what they're doing with it, investing in NFTs, what they're doing with that. So I do think it's mainstream. I think that's the same kind of conversation we would have had 2 years ago, talking about, a private equity fund, or talking about individual stocks or venture capital. We had that conversation about crypto. So I think it is very mainstream at the moment.
Okay.
At least in Singapore and San Francisco and Hong Kong.
Yeah. Yeah.
If Matt Damon's promoting it, it's mainstream, right?
What
Yeah,
was sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to add on that. I think you can see clearly the trend of involvement of, the sophistication of players who join this wagon, right? So now increasingly we are approached by hedge funds. These are all multi-dollar sort of, it used to be macro funds, right, who traded crypto as a commodity. Now there's credit guys came in, right, to try to do crypto bonds. Then the long-short equity guys came in, they try to look crypto individual assets from the fundamental analysis point of view, right? So each one of them are sort of inspired by the market performance to start, right? And also inspired by their team members. So it used to be constrained by the mandates, but the PM realized the entire analyst team is talking about, the analysts tend to be younger and join out of university or what, tend to be talking about these new assets, and they have been all doing pretty well by themselves, right? So the PM start to ask the analysts to sort of educate the team, and then they approach us as an institution, right? These are all multi-billion dollar hedge funds. So I think this year will be an exciting one. We see a lot of more new sophistication and deep pockets funds, right, entering this space to make it much more stronger and resilient to any shocks.
So it's the fear of missing out phenomenon.
Yeah, I think it's a catchy way to say it, but essentially it's hard. It's actually very hard to ignore by now.
But but I think the other thing is that it's you see great volatility. I'm curious as to how you guys handle that, when you're seeing those numbers go up and down. Especially Yulong, your clients, who want a little bit more stability, how do they respond to that?
No, I think overall, to start with, the overall crypto volatility has been reducing, right? Even though it still has a high level, but it has been reducing. You see clear trends. Partial reason is the institutional participation, right? With the stronger hands, in the markets, the volatility tends to be reduced. And then secondly is the assets that we focus on, right? BTC Ethereum has way lower volatility than any of the alts. So it's partially one of the reasons why. So institutions, when they came in, they only focus on the larger assets with a longer track record. Lastly is that I think overall the volatility in a lot of markets tend to be higher towards the year, and at the current market macro environments as well. If you look at the S&P, it has some huge moves recently as well. But I think again we are at the current crypto sort of level. We think into the new year this level will be reduced, and then people are starting to, they don't put 100%, they don't put everything into crypto, right? They put a little bit allocation in. So far there's a lot of statistics analysis on how a marginal allocation of crypto could help you reduce the correlation in this in your basket. So I think with the lower so expected lower volatility into the future, into this year, hopefully that effect will be amplified further.
So Rebecca, has that convinced you to go into crypto yet?
Well, I think I'm still on a wait and see about the volatility issue, but yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people are into it, and they were into it very early. So, you know, Tim Draper was one of the early adopters, right? And people like that. But yeah, no, I'm not. I'll take a wait and see. But anyhow, great panel, David, and thank you, Jeff, and thank you for being with us. And
thanks, everyone.
Yeah, we'll be following you. Well, we're going to be watching you guys. So thank you again. And
thank you.
Move on now.
Thanks.
Moving on. So next, I'd like to introduce our next panelist, who is Darren Young, is the head of TMT of Asia Pacific at KPMG. And Darren is going to be sharing some thoughts about the data imperative. I like that title. And he has some great examples that he's going to show us about why data is imperative for companies and consumers on the user end. So Darren, I would like to turn things over to you, and would love to hear your thoughts about where this whole data analytics trend is going and why it's so imperative.
Thanks, Rebecca, and hi everyone. Hope you're doing well. And I jumped in on the back half of that conversation, which is really fascinating. Crypto and NFTs is certainly changing the way we operate. And in the context of that, when we look at what's happening around the world, Rebecca, you know, the way companies operate, let's call them traditional multinationals and perhaps more traditional organizations who work more in the physical world, to the TMT clients or the technology-based clients who are moving towards more digital based interactions. And then I guess to the end extreme, which is the fully virtual world, where we're buying virtual assets and dealing with virtual or digital currencies. I think in all of that space, it all comes back to ultimately data and how we interact. So when in a binary relationship, we're buying and selling goods and services. But as you know, with you know, in the last decade or so, the tech companies and tech giants, how they've used information around all of us to provide different interactions with us has been extremely pronounced. And I think that leads to questions around security, confidentiality, and more broadly, just, you know, how much of my personal information or footprint do I want out there in the market? But having said all that, we conducted a research in November last year with 300 TMT clients. So that's telco, media, and technology clients. And I wanted to do two things. Was to first share a bit about that. And if you've got any questions, please chime in. And then lead into some examples of how we're seeing convergence and the real world examples of why this is so important to all of us here on this call. So I think, let me just share the slides. Great. And Rebecca, if there are any questions that I can't see because I'm in, say, presentation mode, just please feel free to just interrupt and let me know.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay. So the first thing I want to highlight here was that, let me just go back. Was that there were three key bits of information that came out of our research. You know, we know data is the new oil, but however, it's not being mined as effectively as what we all imagine. The first statistic, business model transformation, really alludes to the fact that many companies are trying to act more like a digital native. And by that, what I mean is real-time, high velocity, low friction engagements. Traditional companies with data have a very linear and long cycle time to interact, be it creating new product, a new service, whatever it may be. But as you know, with the digital native startups, and now with crypto and NFTs, the speed by which people turn around interactions is infinitely faster. And that's primarily because of the way the data is presented and managed. So in the first statistic, we said what we saw was 75% believe that using an enterprise data strategy can radically change their business model. So the key message was we can do more, but if you go to the next bullet, you will see that how we do that is becoming more of a challenge. Enterprise data strategy for them was really around how do we connect all our data points together. Traditionally, we look at just say one bucket, CRM or ERP, but when you really look at the multiple facets of where data is and data pipelines are, there are probably hundreds of data sources. And we're now talking around plugging in external data points too, like Facebook data or LinkedIn data. Has someone just moved house? Because it's public information. You know, is there a specific health issue in a region? Can I act on that? So external data points drive combination of other data sets to provide interaction. And when we looked at this statistic, 50% of people didn't have a defined enterprise data strategy, which is considerably high. And the last part, which is not necessarily surprising, is, you know, until you have the first two, how you use your customer data, only 32% of them fully utilize that customer data. And this is not just around confidentiality and security of information, but more around how do I provide a real-time interaction that is meaningful to us. So just pause there. I'm not sure, Rebecca, if you had any questions or comments around that, but that's kind of the crux of our research. There's a lot more data and information there, but really just wanted to anchor the examples I'm going to take you all through in a second.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to see the contracts about those who, you know, want to be able to using this, and then those who are really not using it yet. So there's a huge gap there that I guess will be filled at some point.
Absolutely. And so for all of you, or many of us on this call who are involved with innovation and trying to come up with new ideas, as we speak to traditional companies, be it a telecom company, an insurance, a bank, they're all trying to become a digital native, and they're all trying to pivot to new business models. So often I get the question, how do I resolve this, and how do I do this in the world I'm living in today? So here's an example I'd like to take you through and just give you a bit of a sense of how that works. If you look at that lock, that door lock, many telco companies are now looking into selling hardware and equipment. And if you think around the fact that each and every one of us now can be proven to be staying at home, and because we're at COVID a lot more time, why is it that we're paying the same home insurance policy rates? Because we know that when someone's at home, the rate of burglary significantly drops. So by connecting data information, which is information around someone being at home, it could even be movement detectors based on cameras in the house, a package that a telco provides, plus the fact that the motivation is if you allow us this information anonymized, we will give you discounts on home insurance policies for burglary, as an example. So you can see in this case, telecom plus insurance are looking at new business models. Now, the innovation comes in is that telecom companies and insurance and health companies don't often think this way. And so the innovation and startup community starts to incubate, how can we solve this problem around connecting different sectors, different problem statements to provide real world experience and change. And you can see the other one here with the smartwatch. You know, we've seen many telco companies start to bundle smartwatch packages, but sharing of data and information could actually reduce your health premiums, particularly if you share your steps, you share your weight, you share your blood pressure, all these IoT connected devices in the home. And this is just two small examples of what those could be. Could you imagine how much data can be managed within just the home by which everyone is now trying to interact? So this is a great example of what we're seeing in the market. And the ability to do this requires the first three steps on the other page, which is democratized data, open data platforms, and the ability to integrate customer data with experiences and new ways of working.
So these are all new product offering areas for companies in these spaces that they can market these kinds of products and say, well, if you do this, then we'll reduce your premium by that. And it becomes a competitive kind of offering that they can make.
Exactly. It's their response to what I would call the digital native startups. In Asia, it's, you know, you've got Grab and GoTo, you've got Amazon, you've got all these digital companies who are interacting with us via our handphones daily. No one's gotten the ecosystem of the home right yet. There are these smart speakers in the house, and I think that's going to be very much integrated into these type of solutions, Rebecca.
That makes sense. The doorbell, the doorbell that you can see somebody there, and the applications around that. So I can see how the integration of data into these products, you know, can lead to innovation.
Absolutely. So it's actually, I mean, part of the problem is the ideas and the ideation, which is where innovation starts. But and then the other part is the hardware and the product, by which there's a lot of those that you can see in your electronic stores. But the integration of all that and the multiple source of where data comes and integrating them is actually the biggest challenge. Now, if you own the full ecosystem, we've seen how, you know, big tech companies have done that. You know, Apple being one, Google being another, Amazon being another there, and they're all moving into different technology adjacencies to basically do things more seamlessly and provide more value to all of us. Okay, so the next one I'll just take you through is a quick one here. Another example, what we're seeing is automotive insurance and telecom, and this is less around about you know, just basically insurance as a service or you pay as you go. But actually what it starts to do is disrupt business models, because as we move into EV and autonomous vehicles, be it cars, be it scooters, be it bikes, what we're going to start to see is more information around that network and that ecosystem. We're looking at supply chain, we're looking at tier 1 to tier 4 delivery, a lot of information that's going through this network. And what we're starting to see is that with information, you can drive a better experience, particularly if people are spending 2 hours of their time in the car a day driving to and from work. You know, that's significant, given that that's captive and you're in the car. So how could you provide real-time experiences knowing that you're stopping at this pace every single day on the way to work, or you're passing this location every single day on the way to work? Is that an opportunity to interact? If my mother, who only drives 10 times a year, drives safe, doesn't accelerate quick, brakes, you know, why is she paying the same premium as a 40-year-old person who's driving every single day? The risk premiums are lower. And so what this creates is different avenues for people to, again, to interact, disrupt insurance, and drive different ways of interacting. And again, it all comes down to the data that's being sent from the car, the information of the person, the black box information that is being, you know, sent out in terms of where, you know, where the car's driving and how it's accelerating and how it's braking. So these are just examples from a consumer point of view, but it also goes into B2B, preventive maintenance, and all those other things that people are talking around in terms of, say, logistics companies.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely seeing this in the auto insurance business. The use of telematics to determine premiums.
Absolutely, and I think in the future when we've got our EVs coming out, electronic vehicles, there's a lot of different things that will start to pop up. You know, we know with our handphone where we're going. Well, the car actually knows where we're going to. How does that provide the interaction experience within the car to offer new offers, services, experiences? This one here is interesting, and this leads to a little bit of what we were talking you were talking about earlier, Rebecca, around say crypto. But you know, in the big picture, we've got a lot of emerging technology. We have 5G IoT, which is kind of what I've touched on there indirectly. We've got crypto, NFTs, blockchain, and a lot of these technologies are doing multiple things. They're providing new avenues and channels by which to interact. So the channel to market based on the consumer that is engaging has so many different touch points. If I ask you the question of, do you know those brands and how many of you use those brands every day, there's a different response for each of us. The other avenue is, where do we play and how do we play? We all know we're in the home more because of COVID. We all want to get into payments more. We heard that around NFT and crypto. We all see different ecosystems in the way we get food delivered or get the deliveries nowadays. And we're all looking for new products and there's new channels that we are engaging with. So at the end of the day, the combination of those two things drives different interactions. And everyone wants to get into payments. Everyone wants to basically look at helping people, let's say, trade their new cryptocurrency. How do I engage and promote my new product seamlessly? Now, in short, the traditional way is going through TV, print, and maybe now web, okay, on ads. However, companies like TikTok, obviously, as you all know, are interacting in a very humorous way and operating in a very different way. But the point here is that what people are using TikTok now for is not around just creating funny campaigns, because that's what we see, but we're linking it to brand product launches. And so the examples could be, for example, is I want to launch a new crypto trading platform, right? And go to TikTok and hashtag something and says, I'll pay TikTok to help create a campaign around the new crypto trading platform. But rather than push information and the crypto trading platform, the hashtag says is whoever creates the most innovative hashtag around crypto trading, i.e. gets the most laughs, gets something in return. Call it a Bitcoin. Given the pricing today, that's not small. But the point is really around the hashtagging and the engagement is the selling point. The benefit, the outcome is product and brand awareness. So rather than lead with the product and brand, you lead with the interaction and the consumer behavior that you're wanting to drive, i.e. I want to create a share something within, I want to hashtag something on TikTok. Now, when you look at all these other areas, be it Instagram for images or Facebook, there are so many different ways that people are interacting using social media to interact. I would assume also in the future that would be in the new NFT worlds of Metaverse and the way you interact virtually. So again, all coming back to data, all coming back to how you engage and really giving opportunities for people to create, in this case, 373 million video views, you know, with 943,000 videos submitted.
Yeah, amazing. So since you started off talking a little bit about data privacy, and data is just being so pervasive, I mean, what are companies doing about the data privacy issue? Is this a real top priority? I would imagine it would be the top priority.
It's a massive priority, and I think a lot of the challenges around regulation and risk. So when you move into payments and banking, a lot of the challenges around regulations. What companies are doing are a few things. One is obviously seeking the endorsement of the customer to share data. And in this case is flipping it on its head, is rather than mine your data for benefit, I will let you decide what you share and I will reward you for sharing. So for example, is Rebecca, if I said to you, share with me your location anonymously, so I can't see your name perhaps, but I can see your age bracket, perhaps your income bracket, up to you, 5 times a week or 7 days a week. And if you share, I will give you in return free mobile phone bill as an example, but you can turn it on and off whenever you wish. So the point is the power goes back to the user to share the data, but they get rewarded for that. Other than the current situation is, give me your data, you keep paying the same, and actually I'll just keep marketing to you. Now, in that scenario, you could even take it a step further and say, well, how many ads would you be willing to receive a day, Rebecca? 1, 2, 5, 50? Now, all of a sudden, if you decide I only want to receive 1 a week, 1 a day, that puts the power to you. And in that conversation, then you're willingly accepting 1 ad a day because I've decided on the amount, frequency, and type of ads that I'm going to be engaging with. Now that data is becoming hugely valuable because that can be marketed directly to the big brands that want that data.
Sure.
And it's been authorized. Now, the other way is separation of data, and obviously separating confidential data and focusing on what we're calling clustered data. So for example, I don't need to know, Rebecca, your personal name, but what I do need to know is that, you know, you're in the age group of 45, you're based in the US. I want 10,000 of your profiles in the US, and that's my persona I want to target to. So buying 10,000 buckets of information is very different to individual information. And so therefore, by engaging in those fashions, that drives different ways around getting, also getting around privacy, but you're not dealing with confidential data or privacy concerns anymore. You're engaging around groups of people who have a different, it's at a high level of engagement, if that makes sense.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I can see there's a lot of dimensions to this, and you have explained it. And I like these examples very much that you showed, how product model innovation can happen as a result of using data more effectively. So I think your study, how do people access the study?
Yeah, well, what I can do is I can send you a copy of the list, Rebecca, I mean, of the outcome of the report if you wish, and you can send it on to everyone.
Okay.
But obviously, if there are any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself directly or Rebecca, and happy to try and answer any of those. But you know, really pleased to have this time, and thank you for inviting me to this session. And I hope that it provided some good feedback and ideas for those on this call, particularly all those innovators out there, because there's a lot of innovation that we need, a lot of opportunities for you to engage. So really, really keen to hear and see what comes out of all of those on this audience.
Very good, Darren. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks,
All
everyone.
right, so we're going to move on in our swift moving program. It is rather swift. So we are next going into, Darren joined us from Australia, I think, but he's based in Singapore. And Jacko Zhang is joining us next. She's the director of the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office. And Jacko, I know that you want to be talking about the startup story in Hong Kong. Certainly there's a lot of news coming out of Hong Kong these days, but startups is one of the more positive news items coming out of Hong Kong, and certainly watching it grow up over the past decade or so, decade and a half, seeing the number of unicorns and the number of listings out of Hong Kong. It's been truly a very transformative time. So Jackie, we'd love to hear more about it and what you have on the agenda for this coming, for this year now. It's no longer coming, it's here, 2022. And I know you have your Start Me Up Hong Kong Festival coming up, I think in May. Anyhow, I'd love to hear a little bit of an overview of the startup scene in Hong Kong. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? Where are listings going? Are you seeing more international VCs coming in? These kinds of questions. Maybe you can give us a brief overview. But thank you.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here today among so many impressive innovators, investors, and risk takers from all over Asia. So Hong Kong is fully committed to encourage and support further growth in innovation and technology with key policy initiatives, investments, funding, and talent attraction programs. To do so, the Hong Kong government is investing over $16.7 billion to promote INT development in Hong Kong. In fact, as Rebecca just said, in the past 10 years, Hong Kong has really made great strides in building a thriving startup and technology ecosystem, and we have seen impressive results. Hong Kong has always been an outstandingly easy place to do business, but startups often need more help. And Hong Kong has developed large-scale incubators and accelerators that can give startups a big push. In the past 10 years, numerous startups have gone through supporting programs in Hong Kong Cyberport, as well as Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, including some of our homegrown unicorns. There have been at least 11 unicorns from Hong Kong in the past 10 years, including in the logistics sector, such as GoGoX and Lalamove, in the fintech sector, such as WeLab and AirWallex, AI, such as SenseTime and SmartMore, tourism, such as Cloak, and crypto and blockchain technology, such as the company of one of our speakers today, Animoca Brands.
Right.
So
Yeah, he's coming on next. Yeah, Sue is coming next. Next year.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the success of these startups really, I think, depend on many factors. And one key element is the availability of investment. Hong Kong had worked hard to cultivate the presence of venture capital and private equity in the city. By some estimates, there are more than 400 venture capital firms in Hong Kong. Some of the very active VCs in Hong Kong are Sequoia Capital, Alibaba Entrepreneurship Funds, Horizon Ventures of the Li Ka-shing Group, Qiming Venture Partners, Alpha Intelligence, just to name a few. The availability of funding covers every stage of a startup's development and support tech firms from a wide variety of sectors.
So I should let me just mention that we're going to have a startup pitching from Hong Kong soon, and they're in the NFT space. So stay tuned.
Yeah, definitely. So art tech is another area that Hong Kong is trying to develop as well. So I'm very happy that we have a company pitching today, kind of connected to that space as well.
Yeah, the NFT space. Yeah. And the blockchain, obviously.
Yeah. Yes,
so,
of course.
Let me just, there's a question that came in from the audience, and I didn't want to ignore it, but I wanted to ask you about the impact of the changing economy and the changing political scene in Hong Kong. What kind of impact is it having on startups and innovation in the community?
Mm-hmm. I think
doesn't sound like it's, yeah, anyhow, you answer.
Yeah, I mean, there have been political changes, but basically right now, the biggest impact really is COVID. So with the cessation of international travels, there have been many issues with international business community, especially in Hong Kong, who are having significant troubles, for example, visiting their families overseas or doing any kind of business travels. Sure. As you know, Hong Kong and China are practicing the zero COVID strategy. So that is a major hurdle, and it's a complaint that we've heard from the chambers and business communities in Hong Kong most loudly. In terms of the political stability issue, that is, I think, many of the businesses that focus on doing business do not feel particularly affected. And I have talked to many businesses in Hong Kong, as well as businesses in the US who are interested in the Chinese market. They still consider Hong Kong to be the best gateway to tap into the Chinese market. So that has not changed.
Okay. And the innovation thread, has it changed at all? The innovative culture?
There are.
Hong Kong has always been this hugely dynamic, fast-moving place. And
that's right. I think, yeah, I think I think the same question can be posed on China. Do you see innovative companies coming out of China? I think you do. And so Hong Kong is, it's under one country, two systems, and it's still thriving. And so I think we are still seeing a lot of innovative companies coming out of Hong Kong. as you well know, and as we will hear from them later on as well.
Yes, we're going to have Yatsu joining us from Animoca Brands, which is one of the leading NFT digital metaverse players in Asia, and they're based out of Hong Kong. And Yatsu is a really famous serial entrepreneur from Hong Kong, so we're really happy to have him. And then we're going to have the NFT innovator with Articoin, and they're going to be talking. Well, actually, they're going to do a pitch, which is really interesting. And then I want to ask you, are you still going ahead with your Start Me Up Hong Kong Festival for May?
Yes, it is. We still plan to do that. It's scheduled for May 23rd to 28th. And last year we had a hybrid event, and we had over nearly 40,000 participants. So that was pretty good. And that is Start Me Up Hong Kong Festival is held annually, and it was a fantastic event. We still plan to do it in May. And then in November, we're planning to have the Hong Kong FinTech Week. So it is now Asia's flagship FinTech conference. And so we hope the audience will check it out too.
Okay, well, we'll keep them informed. But thank you, Jacko. It's very informative. I really appreciate it. And the audience does too. So, all right, now moving along, we are going to be bringing in Yatsu from Animoca, and I need to share the screen. So give me a moment here while I do that, because he is joining us by video. And what I should say is that, well, hello, everyone. Okay, we are here today. What I should say is that I may not play this whole thing because tomorrow I'm going to be sharing it on YouTube. So I would like to also get to the pitch from Hong Kong pretty soon as well. So the Articoin entrepreneurs who are waiting, you may not need to wait the entire 20 minutes for this video, but I will be putting it online tomorrow at our YouTube channel. But if you want to just get a little flavor of what this is all about, I'll play a little bit of it. So here we go. Okay, with Yatsu, who's one of the Hong Kong's famous entrepreneurs. He is in this new space of metaverse and blockchain in a big way. He's the chairman and co-founder of Animoca Brands, which is really the top open metaverse player in Asia. And we're going to hear a lot about what he's up to and how Animoca is also investing in some of these companies that are in the NFT space. So hello, Yat, how are you today?
Great, and thank you for having me.
Oh, we're so glad to have you here. You're just a real expert and a real leader of the entrepreneurial scene in Hong Kong as well. So first, you know, I found it really fascinating about your background that you actually grew up in Vienna and your parents were musicians. And I've always heard that music and math and computer skills, that they go together. So it seems in your case that maybe that's so.
Well, that's, you know, it's interesting, right? Because I think one of the interesting things about music is that I think the biggest skill I took back from learning music is discipline. Because one of the things about music is that while, you know, there are the creative elements, I think that really came from the environment I grew up in. You know, growing up in, you know, I grew up in Vienna. I was born and raised there. And as you said, my parents both studied music. My mother became a professional musician. And I think the one thing that really sort of I absorbed was the culture around me. And I think this is the part, perhaps, if looking back, that mattered to me there, because, you know, in our family home setting, in the friends that we had, is mostly discussions about culture, about humanity, about the arts. You know, it was less about sort of, you know, money or economics or that type of stuff, because certainly in the 70s and 80s, you know, that wasn't the thinking. But also growing up in Vienna, I was also in the middle of sort of, you know, the Cold War, right? I mean, the United Nations was in Vienna. There was, you know, the Eastern Bloc countries of the past, right? The, you know, the border issues, you know, the Berlin Wall, right? So the whole environment in which I sort of grew up together with the literature and the culture of the time, music and arts on one hand, spy novels on the others, right? And conspiracy theories and all that stuff, provided for a very interesting backdrop, I think, in the way that the way I grew up. So all of that, however, which I think is an interesting reflection where we are today, centered around sort of, I guess the humanity and the arts and culture around all of that. But it is because of computers that I actually discovered, I guess, because of music that I actually discovered the computer, because I was not particularly gifted in music, right? And so some of my sort of, fellow students, it was just really great. My mother had perfect pitch, so she could just, literally just listen to something and it just pop up in her head. I didn't have that gift. And I'm an only child. And so all aspirations and musical hopes, I guess, were centered around the child who was not particularly gifted in music. But I used a computer to help me with composition. I wrote software that basically would help me sort of, I guess you could call, back then people may have said it's a little bit like cheating, right? Because it's like using a calculator in a math quiz. I ended up basically using a computer to help me compose faster, because it was more natural for me to play on a keyboard attached to a MIDI port and then basically edit that than using pen and paper. That was just not something that I was particularly good at. That didn't really help me in school, but it helped me basically find opportunity online through a service called CompuServe, where I uploaded the software. And back in the day, people didn't care about sort of, privacy. They just basically just put all that whole address on the details there and said, hey, if you like the software, then come send me some money. That's basically what I did, not hoping that anyone would send me money. It was just purely bragging rights. And then literally sort of months after, I started receiving checks in the mail from strangers I did not know. And I didn't have a bank account because I was 13 years old. So that was kind of the background as to sort of how I got into tech. And I think really for me, that's how I made friendships online through CompuServe with people I did not know, right? I was using acoustic coupler to connect, afterwards a modem, right? So it's a really pre-metaverse, pre-internet type service, super primitive. But, I guess that's how I found my opportunity. And it later led me to a job at Atari, which, again, seemed random at the time. But, I think just to reflect, I was an Asian minority in Vienna that did not have many Asians or Chinese, period, right? I was a child, and yet I was still able to basically get into a sort of, I guess, a tech job, simply because of what I knew and what I could do, not because of how old I was, or perhaps what I appeared to be. But also, to be fair, in the 80s, having a job in tech was not anything to be celebrated. Right? It was
Not like today.
Yeah, not like today. It was more like, oh, that's weird. What are you doing? I don't understand, but okay, fine.
It also then going to Asia was kind of looked at as different than it is today. Today it's looked at as a real opportunity, or it was before COVID anyhow. Traveling internationally, going to Asia, but you went to Asia early on.
Yeah, I basically came to Hong Kong, and because my father's from Hong Kong, I guess I had permanent residency, so I could just stay here. But through a series of opportunities, including starting a company after Atari went under in the early 90s. Now, at that point, I was in the US. I ended up coming to Asia through an acquisition by SGI, which is another company that maybe some people might not have remembered. But in fact, SGI was a very common occurrence in CES, right? Because they were the leading sort of visual graphics computer system at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they were pushing this thing called WebForce, and had acquired sort of the company I was with, and that led me to Asia. As you said, I was the only Asian on that team, sort of writing basically software that was supporting at the time VRML, which is basically an early version and of VR, and I basically was the HTML equivalent of a VR, based on OpenGL. And they needed people to help basically spread and support that in Asia, when SGI was really sort of trying to run behind sort of Sun Microsystems as the new internet machine at the time. So I went to Japan, I went to Taiwan, and then came to Hong Kong. And I realized that I could live here because of my father. And I also realized that I could get my internet. So they didn't even have a CompuServe node. So I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So I guess in the classic somewhat foolish but entrepreneurial spirit, I said, well, why don't I just start a sort of an ISP in Hong Kong? Because, you know, we need internet. Internet was good to me, so I think internet should be good for everyone else. So I started an ISP. You know, that was, I think I was 19 or 20 at the time. I was quite young. So, you know, I didn't have a business degree or a business school background, anything like that. So I didn't have a business plan. And it was really difficult because I literally felt like I was selling sort of fridges to Eskimos, because everyone really didn't know why they needed this. But it taught me a few things about being really early. And I guess, you know, taught me something about business grid, you know, before eventually starting Outblaze, which was basically a very early cloud computing business, although they wouldn't call it cloud back then. It was called ASP in 1998. And with that business, I guess, that was later acquired by IBM, I guess, was one of the very first, I guess, you know, maybe earlier, slightly bigger tech experiences that Hong Kong had.
Right, right. So now with the metaverse, where does Asia stand in relation to other markets around the world in its adaptation of the metaverse and the whole ecosystem around the metaverse? Where is Asia? And where is Hong Kong in that? How does Hong Kong factor in too?
Well, I think this is one of those moments in time where actually the playing field is relatively open still because we're so early, right? It's like smartphone, mobile phone, sort of in terms of most recent times, smartphone and mobile phone development back in 2008, 2009, just when it was emerging. It was really sort of anyone's game to sort of emerge. And it was because of the smartphone, for instance, that, you know, in the early days, you had HTC come up, right? And then you had Samsung and LG, you know, from a sort of handset standpoint, actually, Asia really emerged as a global leader because of the smartphone in terms of the hardware side of things. And even on manufacturing, after all, everything that you're using on your iPhone actually comes from this part of the world, right? So I think it's a similar opportunity. But let me just make a distinction between sort of when people talk about the metaverse, it's still a vague term for many because they're like, well, what is the metaverse? You could argue that maybe we're already in a kind of quasi-metaverse, because when you think about your daily interaction, what's the first thing you do? Probably you're on an online device, right? How much time do you spend on Instagram, on WhatsApp, on WeChat, you know, and all these services? And what do you do later on? Do you probably play a game? When you take the sum total of the hours that you're spending, you're probably already virtual most of the time. And so one could argue that we're already in a kind of metaverse, right? And many of the companies out there that are saying we're building the metaverse, whether this is Facebook, aptly renamed Meta as of late, or even game companies like Roblox, or studios like Epic, you know, with games like Fortnite, or even in China, right? I mean, both Tencent and Alibaba have been registering, you know, Chinese equivalent trademarks for metaverse, right? So they would all say that we're kind of building the metaverse already, but these are all closed metaverses. They're actually not real metaverses as far as we're defining those, right? And so it's important to make that distinction, because if you say, well, if you're a metaverse like Facebook, then you could say it's already here and we're experiencing it, which is somewhat true, but we're entirely dependent on them, right? We're basically renting on their platforms. We don't own any of that, right? So we're dependent on that. And just imagine what happens if you are removed. Every day, software developers get removed from the Apple App Store for reasons that they don't fully comprehend. Every day, rules are being changed at Apple and Instagram in terms of how you can be discovered, right? So it's like changing the laws of a country, but on a regular occurrence. And then we're expected to survive and do well in those business environments, right? So that's kind of the circumstance of those. What we're building is the open metaverse. It's based on blockchain, which basically means that the data paradigms are owned by everyone. And, you know, we can talk a little later about NFTs, but NFTs basically represent the actual property rights that you can actually have in this open metaverse. And in that sense, I would say that Asia is not sort of leading just yet, only because of the fact that it's a fairly new technology. But if you look at historically, Asia hasn't normally been the place where everyone sort of where innovation starts right away, right? If you look at sort of the birth of the internet, even if you look at smartphone, the creation and everything. So it's not that necessarily that happens really strong in this part of the world, but the adoption rate, the acceleration rate, you know, in this part of the world is awesome, right? And so I fully expect it to be very quick. Where we as Animalco Brands have built ourselves up, and many of our earliest investments and growth actually came from the West. It came from the US and Europe. the sandbox, it really sort of is, that studio actually that built it is actually in Argentina, but they've had most of their growth in the US actually, and in Europe. The next part of their office is in Paris, right? As an example. And, we have also holdings in OpenSea, which is also US based, or Dapper Labs, which is also North America based, right? And so on. So that was in the early days when we got involved in this space really 4 or 5 years ago. But now, of course, a lot is emerging in Asia. And, where do the customers come from? The customers are actually mostly in Asia, who are online, who are digitally very connected. And for us, the transition in this part of the world is natural because they're already in a kind of pre-metaverse. So if they can then move into the real metaverse as we would define it, I think this part of our region is going to do really well.
Okay, that's really interesting. So, so the customers for this are probably all, I mean, is it mostly male or not? Mostly male, teens, 20s?
I mean, I think, interestingly enough, it is not mostly male, although I would say a majority is male, but it's not like a skewed ratio, like, 99% male, 1% female, right? And I think it has a lot to do with the engagement of, at least for Open Metaverse, interest that a lot of women are actually really interested in the whole field of crypto. So they may not necessarily be looking at non-fungible tokens right away, but they're interested in this new form of value, this new form of money that they're sort of looking at. And so actually understanding crypto is essentially one way to start entering into the Open Metaverse, because the whole crypto scene actually created a banking system and a money system for this metaverse. And the non-fungible tokens represented the objects and things like property, like houses in the real world, but in the digital world of the metaverse. So the interaction is natural in that sense. And if you think about the explosion of what happened with non-fungible tokens, for instance, where everyone's going like sort of, for the expensive artwork and the expensive, items and virtual cars and, virtual characters to play with, it seems almost fantastic. But actually, this was only possible because of last year's DeFi Summer. For those who were sort of in the crypto scene, actually what DeFi Summer created was a banking system, an entirely permissionless, open virtual banking system, which we at the surface, for most of us, interact on the level of, oh, I hold some Bitcoin, oh, I hold some Ethereum. That's more as a holder activity, but actually there's a full-on banking system that can be utilized to generate yield, to create products and services on top of it. And after that was well established with billions of dollars of value locked, the non-fungible tokens, which represented the assets and objects, became basically products that banking could service. So now you have lending, you have mortgaging, you have financing, all of these things that banking traditionally offers in the physical world, but entirely virtual. And people started to build on top of these platforms. And the combination of the two actually is what created today what we see with the Open Metaverse. Where people are basically having full-time employment in those areas, billions of dollars of values being created. And, each of these metaverses, like our sandbox or our portfolio Axie Infinity, they should no longer be viewed as a company. They are in fact like a nation, like a country. And the value of their entire economy is measured in the form of a virtual GDP instead of a sort of PE.
Yeah, and the growth rates are phenomenal, aren't they? I mean, give us a few examples of what this growth rate is like.
Yeah, I mean, so an example, for instance, just for ourselves, right? I mean, our income in the first 9 months of the year, basically shot up to, over $500 million, which is, quite an amazing number for where we were even just a year ago. But then, for instance, like for Sandbox, obviously crypto markets are volatile, but it's fully diluted token valuation at $1.20 billion, right? It's like, which is pretty significant given where it was. And sort of its economic impact and the volume of trade is in the billions of dollars a day, right? So this basically, so when you start to measure something just like Sandbox, it actually now has an economic activity, and it's an imperfect measure, of course, but the economic activity around the Sandbox and the trading of its virtual land and its assets, as well as its token, if you were to annualize it, is actually now amongst the top 100 countries in the world, right? So, so of course it's an imperfect analogy, but it just gives you a size of the scale of what happens there. because the people in the sandbox are actual virtual citizens. We have people who are sort of metaverse architects, who are now almost 20 or 30 people in size, who make their full-time living building virtual homes, for others in the metaverse. And, in Hong Kong, for instance, the biggest real estate developers, like New World or Sun Kai Financial, they all bought land on the sandbox and now are developing on top of it. And that's kind of fascinating, because on one hand, you might say, well, this is virtual land. What does it all mean? But actually, the purpose of virtual land is the same as it is in the physical land. It's not the house itself, it's where the house is that matters, right? It's the reason why, New York or San Francisco or London or Hong Kong are the centers that they are. Not because you can have the biggest homes, but because, the embedded network effect, the sort of influence of that region is so desirable. When Snoop Dogg, for instance, purchased land in Sandbox, obviously he created a sensation, and he was building, a cool experience. He sold his tickets to his virtual mansion. They're going for like $2,000 now after the initial sale, because people just want to hang out with Snoop, right? And land even around Snoop Dogg is now worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, because it's kind of becoming sort of the mini Beverly Hills of within the sandbox, right? So it's fascinating how many of the same principles that we see in the physical world actually apply completely in the virtual one.
Yeah. So what about the economic cycle? So, I mean, if you talk about this comparing it to a country GDP or whatever, that has cycles. We go through boom and bust cycles all the time. And in this metaverse world, is that also the case? And how do you prepare for that?
So I think as there's massive growth, it's natural that you see cycles of sort of, a massive boom and then some correction. And that happens all the time. But I think the way that we look at this is, one, there's still only millions of people in the open metaverse. But there's billions of people in the gaming world, for instance, 3.2 billion people, who are all basically still in a closed metaverse. And there's an important distinction here, right? Because we think everyone from closed will eventually go to open because it's better for the user. It's not better for the game company, maybe, but it's better for the user. And so from our point of view, what's better for I guess our virtual citizens, as it were, is where they're going to actually move to eventually once they realize. In the same way that you'd much rather be in a democratic framework where you have rights, as opposed to being in a totalitarian environment where basically you're dictated to, right? Mm-hmm. It's basically the same principle. And I think the other thing is the growth of this economic activity will come on new innovations that are adapted on top of it. The example being that in human history, we, because we have property, because we have ownership of property, you can compose new experiences and businesses on top of it because you have the certainty of doing so. If I buy a house and I know I own it, I'm going to invest more in the renovation. I'm going to put more stuff into it because I know it can be there, or at least I own it. If I rent it, I'm only going to have a limited investment. I'm only going to do so much because I know it's not mine and it won't be permanent. The digital world is entirely rental at the moment. Our engagement and our attention of focus on what we apparently own in the virtual world is that of rental. So we don't care much. It affects retention rates, is how we engage with the platforms. We have no loyalty to anything. We just hop around, right? So everything is attention focused. But when you actually start going into ownership, that shifts, right? In the same way that we're seeing with our metaverses, the retention rates are 50 to 70%, sort of on D30. We're talking about players that are literally living there the whole time. Game companies would kill for those kind of retention rates, but they can't have those because, it's all rented and the players basically don't have any value in there. So they just move away from one place to another. But actually, if you could own your virtual items in a game and you can, if you want to trade them or pass them on or keep them forever, why wouldn't you want to do that? Then play somewhere where eventually, you'll lose everything in due course.
Right. So now your company is actually investing in many of these new metaverse companies and crypto companies. And how many investments have you done so far? And how's your pace of investing now? Are you continuing to invest pretty aggressively, or how is your pace now?
So it's even more aggressive than it was 4 years ago. Because 4 years ago we didn't have that much money, so we couldn't be as aggressive as we like to.
Okay, so, I see.
But either way, So we started very early, I guess, in 2018, and many of those companies have done very well. We've also built our own, like the Sandbox or Rev Racing or Tower and so on. But really, at this point, we are well over 100 investments in this space. And one of the reasons we invest like this, because we're not a fund, so everything's on a balance sheet, right? So the reason we invest so aggressively as well is because we believe in this shared network effect. So with Web3, the whole concept is that we can now own a piece of the network. And therefore, by owning a piece of the network, we can benefit from the shared network effect. By owning an NFT, I actually have a piece of property that gives me sort of, an access to the network effect embedded within everything. So that makes sense then to start investing broadly to help facilitate the growth of that. So we've invested in NFT lending platforms, we've invested in protocols, layer 1s, layer 2s, as well as many blockchain games, and so forth, because we need to also bring more people into that space. So that's kind of, we're in a bit of a hurry because we think the threat also isn't actually, regulation or so on. We think that's a positive thing actually when as it comes. We think it's actually groups like Facebook, for instance, or Tencent, because this business model of an open metaverse is very much in contradiction to the way they've currently constructed their business. It is very disruptive to them because, right now, the take rate, the tax rate of, for instance, a game studio or a company like Facebook is 100%. All the data that you give to Facebook, which makes Facebook valuable, actually doesn't belong to you. You may think you own the data itself, but the network effect that is generated from the data, which is where the value lies, belongs exclusively to Facebook, right? But do they pay you for this? The answer is, of course, no. Do you own a share of this? And the answer is also no. So we are willingly surrendering all of our insights, all of our data. And that's why they're so powerful. It's like getting free oil or free cotton, right? We're not getting paid for that at all. And in the inverse, the open metaverse pays you for that. So players in Axie Infinity, which is one of our most successful portfolios, you have millions of people in the world, in places like the Philippines, literally lifted out of poverty, who, because of COVID, couldn't make any money, but were making $50 a month, are now making $250 to $500 a month. And it may seem from the outside like, well, how can he make so much money playing a game at a scale, in the size of billions of dollars from an economic standpoint? Well, it's not actually because money is just being created. It's because value was already locked because of the time that people spend to add to the network effect. Meaning that, the free players or the players who spend their time in a game or on Facebook or on Instagram are actually adding to that network effect. Because if we do not use Facebook or we do not play our free games, actually the game would not be valuable because people wouldn't pay for the services that essentially our free time gives them. So the paradigm has to change. We either get paid for giving our time, like work, or we take a percentage or a share of ownership of what was created, right? Which is basically basic capitalism at work here. There's nothing new about this, right? And so this has really sort of changed that paradigm. And again, if you can actually make money playing a game because you're actually contributing to the network effect anyway, then why would you ever want to play a game where you're never rewarded for anything, right? So that's basically how we see and why we think this is an inevitable movement.
Wow. You really explain it well. And I think you're right in the thick of it too, right in the center of it. So it'll be really interesting to follow you and see how this all plays out over the coming years. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that was super. I really learned a lot, and I think all the audience members did too. Again, thank you, and we'll see you next time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Bye now. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I thoroughly did. And I think Yatsu is a very engaging individual, very creative soul. And we will see a lot more of him, I think, in the future in the metaverse. Okay, thank you for staying with us. And I am going to be moving next to our finale. which is the pitch of an NFT company, NFT-oriented company from Hong Kong. And we have this courtesy of Cyberport. It's recommended this company, so I do appreciate that. And let's move on to hearing from our panelists, our pitch entrepreneurs from Hong Kong. So are you ready? Larry and Peggy, all in one frame. Wow, it's too much.
We're ready.
Too much all in one frame.
Thank you, Rebecca, for the
Okay,
invitation.
thank you. So now this pitch is coming directly to you from Hong Kong. These are co-founders of a company called, a startup called Kachik, which has a product called Articoin, but you're going to hear a lot more about this in specific in the next 5 minutes. These two are going to pitch, and they are actually looking for some funding, and they're going to tell you what their startup is all about. So, okay, Peggy and Larry, over to you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Hello, everyone. I'm Peggy. I'm the co-founder of Articoin, and we are an NFT platform that promotes sustainability through art and technology. So I've been working with different photographers and artists for 5 years now. And my story began with one single photo from my own wedding. It's an ordinary picture, I would say, with myself, my dad, my mom, but we are smiling really genuinely, happily together. They've actually been separated for a long time, since my first birthday, actually. And this picture still triggers so much emotions from me even today. I really want to connect people through visual memories that can last forever. So I met Larry when we were both working in Morgan Stanley, and we started to build a company to empower different photographers and artists. As of today, our community already has more than 10,000 creators, 5 million assets from over 200 cities in Asia. So here's Larry, and I'll pass it to him to tell you more about himself.
Thanks, Peggy. Hi, this is Larry, and actually I'm a photographer and I love solving problems. Do you know that last year, NFT market is very hot, scoring about 800% growth with 27 billion sales. But do you know that this also makes the earth even hotter? And these transactions have been emitted carbon equivalent to a consumption of a person for 6,000 years. So in Articoin, our vision is to use our green NFT as a medium to bring income to local creators and drive a carbon zero movement and be a hub for people and corporate to add on ESG causes.
So our green blockchain actually uses a proof of capacity method, and it consumes 2,600 times less energy than the traditional proof of work. It also minimizes the cost for all our creators. And what's so special about our content? Well, our NFT don't just come from award-winning artists, but we also work with different schools, with children and other disadvantaged groups to realize their creativity. And each NFT is associated with certain United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We try to tie in sustainability at all levels of our platform. So when you buy an NFT from Articoin, your proceeds will, of course, go back to the local artists, but you'll also get carbon credits to support a sustainability project somewhere in the world. And other parts will be donated to a charity for ESG causes. So let me just quickly show you this piece. Just a second, trying to share my screen with you. So just let me show you this piece. It's the very rare lunar eclipse happened last year, captured by a National Geographic Travel Photographer of the Year, Anthony. We successfully sold this to a senior partner in Deloitte, and he loves it. This transaction has offset 10 tons of carbon, and the proceeds are donated to an NGO that helps people with disability.
So what was the price tag?
That's around Ethereum 0.1.
0.1 ETH.
ETH, yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a good start actually. So our business model is a bit different. Corporations are our first target, They are very interested in our solution for a few reasons. First of all, they are doing some solid things and have some solid mention in their CSR in ESG report, and the activities and the activity and experience also boost employee engagement. And these are all about sustainable investment, and that can offset carbon and can also showcase in the intranet or on their digital display, and then to show their stakeholders, clients, and employees with a PR and potential branding angle.
Mm-hmm. And the carbon credit market is actually worth $2.4 billion at the moment. Articon now has 5 million assets, 5 tons of carbon credits, $5 each. That's a total of 125 million. And we're only talking about B2B. So what if we can bring carbon credits to B2C? On the other hand, NFT is potentially a $1 trillion market. Based on an average transaction price, our assets are now already worth 975 million. We're in a very exciting place. And about our team, Larry and myself are serial entrepreneurs. Our company, Kachik, has 200,000 users already from 200 cities across Asia. And Max Lau, our co-founder, who is also our CTO, he is an ex-Googler who has worked in their office in Hong Kong, in Japan, and the UK. We also have 3 very experienced business advisors from the arts and business background in Asia. So just to give you more information, NDN is one of the most respected entrepreneurs in the region. He is also our blockchain partner. Professor Jack Lau is our one of the advisors and mentor. He is the former chairman and CEO of a listed company. And Derek Collins, he is our art advisor, who is the Dean of Art, and as well as a senior consultant at Philips, which is one of the most prestigious auction houses in the world.
So net zero by 2050 is the common goal and deadline for all of us, no matter where we are. So now we are looking for potential partners, investors who would like to walk or even run with us. We are now raising 2 million to accelerate the development and market expansion to achieve this sustainable future. So together, let's make it happen. And thanks.
Well, thank you very much. So you are incubated at Cyberport, right?
Correct.
Okay. So do you have any financing behind you right now? Beyond
right
the
now,
Cyberport support.
Right now, we are bootstrapping ourselves.
Bootstrapping.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And both of you are from Morgan Stanley, if I have that right?
Yep, you're right.
Okay. So the bootstrapping may not be that painful.
Still
we're trying.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So anyone out there, what's the offer? Okay. What's the offering? What's your pre-money valuation? Okay. You've got a serious investor on the line here. You better answer him.
Yeah, actually, we are raising 2 million for around 8 to 10%. Equity. The pre-money valuation should be around 16 to 20 million.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question, Dan? Anyone else have a question out there for Larry and Peggy, who I think did a very good job at presenting their company? He says it's very high valuation.
Because we aim very high. It's like we are trying to tackle a common problem or a big problem that all of us have stake. So we have found a model, and then we got some solid validation in Hong Kong and Asia. So as Peggy said, with our, the network from our advisors are very broad to listed companies, investment banks. Of course, myself are from investment banks, and then we already have a very solid validation. Peggy mentioned about the carbon credit market is only 2.4 billion, but we believe that it will be 100 times more. Just think about the market cap of Tesla. And they are also doing sustainable thing and sustainable car vehicles. But what about sustainable startup that can achieve carbon zero in another dimension and vertical? So that's how we see the thing. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. Well, that was a good explanation. All right. Well, I think we have to end it there. Interesting. Can you share the link to your marketplace? Is another question.
Yeah,
Can you-
sure. We
Can you put it here in the chat? Can you just put it in the chat?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Type it.
You can go. Yeah, well, actually, I guess you're online, right? You can't do everything at the same time. Multitasking is a little difficult when you're on stage.
We have built the website. We are still building that as we are bootstrapping, but all the validation that we have done have not shown yet on the site.
Okay. All right, that's fine. Well, we'll be back to you then. And Hal Kalman has a final remark, and I totally agree with him that you guys were great, and Yatsu was great, and he mentioned Silicon Graphics, which I remember as well. They were the hot company in the 1990s. The Metaverse, he says, will be very successful. Picking the winners will be harder, so we'll be on the trail, picking the winners and following the news. I thank you very much, everyone. Oh, here's the website, thearticoin.com, www.thearticoin.com, where you can learn more about what they're doing. And thank you again to Cyberport for recommending them as a great Hong Kong company. Okay, so I'm going to make a few final remarks here, and we're going to end today's session. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I certainly did. And I have listened to most of it, all of it actually, for 2.5 hours. And I know a lot of you also did too. So our next programs are going to be the Ask a VC programs. We already have a few lined up for January and February. So please join us at silicondragonventures.com and stay tuned to what we're doing. And thank you, everyone who became a Silicon Dragon Circle member. I see several of you here, Brian, Hal, many others, Michael, Jalaman, many of you have become Circle members, and we do appreciate that because, I'm actually a solo entrepreneur with Silicon Dragon Ventures, so I know a little bit of what it's like. So okay, well, thank you again, and we'll see you again next time. And good night or good morning. Bye now.